Clips. And remember, citizens, always subscribe. Hit the notification bell as well. And $19.95 plus shipping and handling will keep you out of hell. Alrighty, boob-tubes, another Kips Clips. So, another Daily PoliTITS. We look round some of the main English-speaking news outlets and talking heads and see what they're telling you to think about today. And it's quite fun. After the fallout of the local elections on Thursday, Friday and over the weekend, how some of the right-wing press is spinning the disaster for the Conservative Party. You know, they're still like, we still can't say Labour had a good day at the office. I think that's the best way to explain it. So, I think this is going to be the top of our news.
Live from London, this is BBC News. Israel's military begins what it calls a limited and temporary evacuation of civilians from Rafah in southern Gaza. This is the scene live in Al-Mawasi, where the displaced have been told to move to. Chinese President Xi Jinping arrives in France on the first leg of his European tour, his first visit to the continent in 5 years. Argentina's new president, Javier Milei, talks to the BBC and denies claims of burdening his citizens with austerity measures.
Fucking hell, what a pile of shite. I don't know if that's your cup of tea, battering. But I think they're even Eurovision isn't safe or the Israel-Palestine stuff.
Hello, I'm Lauren Taylor. We begin this hour in the Middle East. Israel's military has said it's begun ordering Palestinian civilians to leave parts of eastern Rafah ahead of a planned operation in the southern Gaza city. In this video by the Israeli Defence Forces, they're
how's the ceasefire talks coming along?
Close to the border with Israel to move to what they call a humanitarian zone in the Al-Mawasi and Khan Yunis areas. The IDF have said...
See that pile of rubble? That pile of rubble over there? That's the humanitarian zone. Go and play with the rubble.
That a military operation in Rafah is necessary
to
seek out remaining Hamas fighters, despite widespread humanitarian concern for those sheltering there. Western and Arab leaders have repeatedly warned against such a wide ground operation.
I'm getting into a good habit. See when it comes to 10 o'clock at night,
Meanwhile, officials from Israel and its closest ally, the US, have been holding meetings to discuss alternative, more focused plans. It's not yet clear if the new evacuation orders are part of those. Well, let's speak to James Elder, who's a spokesperson for the United Nations Children's Fund, also known as UNICEF. Thanks very much indeed for being with us. Tell us what you think the impact will be of this evacuation.
Laura, absolutely
playing
you have families in Rafah. Their coping capacity has been smashed. This is 6 months of enduring this war, moving many times, probably having lost a home already. Children are malnourished. They've already been living in conditions with, one.
There's not really much more to cover. Israel's going to go in and fuck that place over. Yeah, idiots, leave. Go and play in that pile of rubble before we fucking flatten yous. Al Jazeera's been kicked out of Israel. They were done a raid on their offices yesterday. Surprise. And here's Al Jazeera reporting from Rafah. Interesting.
The southern part of the Gaza Strip. That's a Mawasi evacuation zone, including the area here at the western part of Rafah City.
So everybody's muchness. Press TV's got to be there as well. Rafah raid anticipated despite international warnings. Everybody's got to be covering that shit. Look how bad their viewing figures are, man. Talk TV is not much longer of this earth. It's hemorrhaging money. It's cut its staff. Let's get rid of all these big hitters. Sharon Osbourne, Piers Morgan, etc. They've got big fat fucks like that. Who's a disgrace to symmetry. They're the only ones left. So the German
They
folk are
believe a
talking about
Rafah
it.
incursion is the best way to pressure Hamas to release the Israeli hostages it still holds.
So, what flavour of jobby supper do you want today? Take your pick. Xi Jinping. He's in France. BBC reported it on it there. I can't remember if they said it was France or not. Yeah. No, of course they're on the
Used to be
Ukraine
much
ticket.
closer to the people when he promised them so much.
A change of power, early presidential and parliamentary elections,
that
and a
Petro
new
Poroshenko?
European government in Ukraine, which will sign an agreement with the European Union and will make the life of every Ukrainian citizen decent, European, successful, and most importantly, with confidence in the future.
From signing the EU agreement to signing one of the toughest military conscription laws in the world, it took the new Ukrainian government just a decade. Starting this month, having HIV, cancer, mental disorders, and even just
fucking off to the
one
front line,
kidney
mate.
are not
The
excuses
cancer's
the Ukrainian
no,
citizen can
the cancer's
use
not
to
going to
avoid
kill you.
service
The
in
Russians,
the
the
country's
the
armed
Ruskies will.
forces. And according to the EU-backed Ukrainian human rights watchdog, all
Want
of these
to.
new implementations are completely okay. In fact, they even added that people dealing with alcoholism or drug addiction are also subject to conscription.
I want to be part of the fucking boozer battalion, man. That would be shit hot. Fucking big bunch of fucking alkies with guns and rockets and shit. What could possibly go wrong?
Logistical assistance and medical assistance services.
The message from Ukrainian leaders to their citizens is clear. You're going to war no matter how unwell you feel. And it doesn't
Look
matter
at that,
that
man.
you're
Russia
certain that
fucking-
people
Russia
with
knows how to do the
physical
propaganda
and
good,
mental
man.
illnesses sounds like a violation of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons.
When I put up the video that was the Ruskies were parading NATO-captured vehicles in Moscow, and I started the video with saying, "Check this amazing part of propaganda out," and somebody left a comment. It wasn't a bad comment, it was just, how can this be propaganda? They're just showing what the the spoils of war and stuff. I'm like, propaganda doesn't need to be fake. Doesn't have to be made up. It can be simple as showing you a fucking monkey with a woman round the fucking shoulder with a German hat on. It can be simple as that. If you can't see the propaganda coup that RT had with fucking Russia had by parading those fucking vehicles,
First stop on his tour.
you don't understand what propaganda's there for.
The Chinese vision is to try to
So he's in Paris.
broaden any gap that they can between Europe and the United States. They are worried that there is a hardening line in Europe against China.
Because let's not forget the one belt, one road
China has
initiative.
been very simple: trade, 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 make money, make money, make money. That's ending. There's a far more of a suspicion now in Europe towards China. In other words, a kind of a closer alignment with the hardline American view of China. There's this policy of de-risking, which has taken hold here in Europe as well as in
Our one belt, one road initiative has plans to go right into East Europe, right up to like Western Germany.
And this has been very
Right.
very clearly articulated by Macron.
Into Germany anyway.
Political rise of China and its potential destabilizing influence on the world. So what Macron, in that context, what the Chinese want to do is to try to broaden any gap between Europe and America, to try to play on any differences between Europe and America. And I think what Xi's trying to do with France is try to say to France, "Oh, you're a wonderful, very important member of the global community. We think you're fantastic, and we love it when you say that you want to pursue an independent third way between America and the rest of the world. That's exactly how we see the world too." They're going to flatter the French and Macron into taking a softer position towards them. And we'll have to see whether it pans out. It certainly doesn't look like it's going to be a particularly easy visit, because Macron is, at the same time this is going on, adopting a very...
So that's touching on
Rafah and surrounding areas in southern Gaza.
Xi Jinping coming over onto
the
the
defense minister yesterday said that
garlic
this
loving
offensive
surrender
could be
monkeys.
imminent. That, as talks about a ceasefire in Cairo seem to fizzle out.
And it's,
And it
as
does
always,
seem now like we are
worthwhile
a
bearing
major
in
step
mind
towards
the
this
One Belt, One Road
operation
initiative
into
and all
Rafah.
that
A
jazz
statement from the Israel
has
Defense
plans to
Forces,
come right into
this
Germany.
morning encouraged
So
residents
Germany's
in
sitting there
Southeast
with the ability
Gaza
to get
to
Russian
get
gas,
out,
cheap
to
Russian
move
gas,
towards what they are calling expanded humanitarian
on
areas
cheap
to the
ship
north,
by
centered
China
around the city
and be
of
King
Khan
Dong in
Yunis
the
and a
European Union.
coastal community called Al Mawasi
Britain and
as well.
America
I can tell you
don't
that
want
yes,
that
they have
because
started
Trump
dropping leaflets
and
in these
Brexit.
areas telling people to do
It's to
exactly
keep the
that, move to these
keep Germany and France in the box,
say
keep
will
them under
contain
control,
field hospitals,
and to keep the
food,
Chinos
water, medicine, additional humanitarian
from
supplies.
gaining
But I have to
other
tell you
allies.
that the international aid agencies, groups like the WFP, will treat this with real skepticism. They say the Israelis simply haven't done enough in this regard since the conflict in Gaza has begun. I should also say that the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, is telling civilians to move back to areas that have already been badly damaged in the fighting. The city of Khan Yunis, for example, was laid
See that
under siege
rubble?
in January.
See that pile of fucking rubble?
Damaged.
Go
Parts of it
and
have
play
been
in it.
very badly bombed. And I think the significance of this announcement are pretty clear. We're standing at the brink of what is going to be another major mass migration of civilians in Gaza. We've got what, 1.2, 1.4? Nobody's
It's
really
moving
sure.
from one pile of
1.4
rubble
million
to the other.
civilians packed
I
into
heard
the south,
fucking figures that
packed
I think
into
it's
Rafah.
60-70%
They
of
are
all
going to
buildings
have to
have
move
been levelled.
again or face the
Fucking
consequences.
hell,
And
man.
I really think that Israel is going to
Make a level of
the
just
limits of the
throwing
support
fucking
that it
nuclear
receives internationally.
tactical
Certainly
nukes
from
on it.
Western nations like the United States. Last week, their Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, he warned the Israelis if they went ahead, they were planning to go ahead with this incursion into Rafah. He said Israel didn't have a credible plan to support civilians and that they wouldn't support it. So what does he do now? What do the Americans, Joe Biden, what do they say now? What does Lord Cameron say?
What can
How
they
do
say?
they respond? Are they going to support this? I think we're entering uncharted territory here.
John, for the moment, thank you so much. And there's more of John's analysis on the Sky News website and Sky News app for you to read in your
It's
own
not John's
time.
analysis.
Well, earlier I spoke to Peter Millett, the former British ambassador
reading
to
what
Libya and Jordan,
his
about
editor-in-chief
developments in Rafah.
has
The
okayed.
idea that the people in Rafah who are already living in tents can move somewhere safe is a bit of a fantasy. I mean, the whole of Gaza has been obliterated. There are no safe spaces anymore. And I think we'll see more destruction and more deaths of innocent people. It's not the way.
Had been dropped by the Israeli military on parts of eastern Rafah.
The
They've also
cogs
been using
just
social
keep
media,
turning.
broadcasts in Arabic and text messages telling people to get out of this area to the east of the southernmost city and basically head towards two humanitarian zones that have been set up. 10 cities in Al Mawasi, which is closer to the coast, that has been expanded in recent days by the Israeli army, and also a tent city just outside of Khan Yunis in the south. And already witnesses are telling us that people are starting to flee from that area. They're using donkey carts, cars where they've got those available, packing up their belongings and moving. Some of them also going, of course, to Western Rafah, a bit closer. And yet the fear does remain, despite the Israeli military saying this is a limited operation, that this could be expanded into a wider ground offensive. The Israeli military, when it was talking to journalists this morning, talked about things happening in a gradual way. They're very aware, of course, that there has been
to the peace
a lot of
talks?
criticism of the
Nobody's talking about the peace talks anymore. Oh, this is a funny
Even
story.
that one region, they only say for essential travel only. Now, this is a really fascinating revelation.
I've not
on
timestamped
many
this
levels.
yet.
I've
but
now
they were
managed
talking
to get
about
a government response. Finally,
sending
Gareth,
refugees to
from,
the
the
shithole of
government on
Iraq.
this story. So I'm going to read
Brought to
that
you
now.
by
They
the
say
UK and the
UK is
US of
continuing to
A.
work with a range of international partners to tackle global illegal migration challenges. Our Rwanda partnership is a pioneering response in the global challenge of illegal migration, and we will get flights off the ground to Rwanda in the next 9 to 11 weeks. So not really commenting
No mention
actually
on Iraq.
on the story. They're not commenting on these leaked documents, for instance. They're not commenting on Iraq. But this is fascinating on many levels, and I think we can hear a clip from the government minister that you spoke to earlier, Gareth.
It's fascinating it's coming out now after the election, you know, rather than prior to it.
I'm not aware of those details. You know, our plan is around Rwanda.
And it's fascinating who leaked these documents and for what reason. Best guess would be it'd be civil service, and they're doing it to try and fuck up the Rwanda shit.
Take off, there will be a steady drumbeat of flights going on a regular basis. I'm not aware of those plans that you talk about for other countries. Our focus is really on getting that Rwanda plan working, but also tackling immigration overall. You look at the deals we did with Albania, for example. Albanian illegal migrants are down 90%. So there is work going on with other countries, but the focus at the moment is getting those flights off the ground.
So you see the minister there really trying to double down on the Rwanda plan, saying
Israel's going to kill the Palestinians. They start talking about rounding up brown people in boats and sending them to yeah, fuck it, alright.
Potentially the lengths to which the
I
government.
heard China's get fucking a good fucking cheap rocket to the moon. Why don't we send the asylum seekers to the moon? They can be pioneers.
Plan off the ground. Interestingly, in some of the
send them up. Nobody really gives a fuck if they die.
Given to us.
And if they die, and we can get them to start
some of their guidance
colonising the moon.
That the government needed to be prepared to pay over
the jokes.
Policy, for instance.
This colour, the horrible, distasteful jokes.
Was seen as actually quite reasonable. It was seen as a modest sum by those high-ranking.
Pretty sure you're still allowed to have a shit sense of humour.
It's interesting to see some of the government thinking behind this third country policy.
Well, any more developments, we're following them closely. Mari, for the moment, thank you so much. Some of the day's other stories for you now. Let's start with Scotland. John Swinney appears to be the next SNP leader and First Minister after his sole challenger for SNP leader, Graham McCormick, pulled out of contention. Mr.
Here's democracy, people.
Is happening on the same day as Scotland.
How many unelected leaders do we have?
First Holyrood election.
I know that's technically not what we do. We don't elect leaders.
Relatives of three Tories
parties and all that
in
jazz.
Mexico last weekend have identified their bodies.
Our democracy
and an American found in a well not far from where they were last seen in Baja California.
Functioning so shitty right now. You've got people in charge flying the fucking shit that nobody would vote for.
Disruption. Members of the Train Drivers Union, ASLEF, will begin a 6-day overtime ban.
I only get 3 out of 10 people willing to even vote. And that's not even, that's registered voters. So if you're not registered to vote, you don't give a shit, alright? The numbers even look even more disaster. So the 10 people that register to vote, only 3 of them actually are somebody I want to turn up to.
There has been a trade war with China over electric vehicles, and Beijing has been accused of assisting Russia by exporting certain technology. Well, let's bring in our Beijing correspondent, Nicole Johnston, who joins us live now from Beijing. What's on the agenda beyond, do you think, that trade war in electric vehicles? What will be discussed? I assume the war in Ukraine, for example.
The borders war.
This is a really significant trip for the Chinese president. He hasn't been in Europe for 5 years, so it is a big deal. Russia is likely to be the main issue on the agenda. We've had a steady drumbeat of diplomacy here in Beijing with the German Chancellor, the US Secretary of State. They've been here and they've all been pushing this same message that the Chinese president will hear
the Green Party, the Liberal Democrat, is a good example of why
they say that
our democracy doesn't serve anybody.
Semiconductors and machinery tools, which allow Russia
it tries to serve everybody, and in the process just turns it into a bureaucratic bullshit show where civil servants, NGOs and outside fucking forces tend to have more control rather than the people who are meant to be taking charge, not just the lawmakers. They're meant to have leadership, you know?
Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, she has taken a particularly hard stance.
So they check, right, look at this, look at the numbers Sky's getting right on there. Not to mention how many they're getting on the TV, other outlets, Sky and all that jazz, obviously. And look at the figures that fucking talk, as they're calling it now. They've had to get rid of the TV and the radio. Because they're not on radio, they're not on TV, they're on internet. And smart speaker, which is the internet. Hilarious, man. I don't know how they can afford to feed
Oh,
this
I
guy.
enjoy jousting with you all the way through.
Insurgents in
But
power.
for now, Mr. John Renzel, thank you very much indeed. John Renzel,
Oh, this is quite funny, actually. This is how
Happy
the right-wing
birthday.
press
Maybe Stuart in Edgware
is
wants to wish you a happy
spinning
birthday. Stuart, very good morning to you.
Labour success.
What would you like to say, Stuart?
What's wrong with your face?
It doesn't look good, does it?
Why is it not symmetrical?
Sunak in against the wishes of myself and others. We were the members. We voted for Liz Truss. They never gave her a chance. They wanted to get rid of her. If she'd have had her policies, we might have been doing quite well now.
Yes.
Hung
But
Parliament.
that's the thing.
Hung Parliament.
Liz Truss actually lost less money in the economy than Rishi Sunak did in subsequent months when he was in.
If she had stayed in, we'd have been in a better position.
Well, talk, as they're now calling it, buddy, is part of the Rupert Murdoch
Titanic heading towards the iceberg, and the captain
media machine.
A football club.
Sky now is owned by
Comcast. He'd have been gone ages ago. Got to get shot of him.
So, being a rich, wealthy person, and by looking at his news and the people that he gets working for him and stuff, you can clearly see that the Rupert Murdoch media machine uses their drivel to try and curry people's favour towards the right
but they might do better by the time the
spectrum of the politics.
Oh, I think so. I think
It's definitely not that hard to see.
No, exactly right. It's going to be an interesting summer, Stuart. Good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. You can join this
The
debate.
BBC kind of do the same thing towards the left side of politics.
499.
Although they've got the facade of trying to be unbiased.
Things to get better for the over the next 6 months, but perhaps Rishi Sunak
Talk TV and Sky News and all that.
Things will get worse for Labour. Well, that's an interesting point, and maybe that's true. Coming up, we'll talk more about the cyclists.
Maybe that's true. Things are getting worse for Labour. Delusional. No, this guy isn't that stupid. He knows the editorial stance he has to take.
And what about pubs?
Who pays his wages and why he's there. He'll pass himself off as an independent journalist. He's not. Nobody sitting on this is independent. They're all paid for, or they won't be there and they won't get paid if they don't toe the party line. It's simple. Anyway, that just annoys me. But we've basically
that the local election results suggest that we're on for a hung parliament, but I think, I suppose, the broader purpose of what Rishi Sunak
that's the best
is
Sunak
to try and
spot.
Instill some enthusiasm, some energy.
You want your parliament to have a big song, don't you?
Speak to Conservative MPs at how despondent many of them are and how tired and flat many of them sound at their prospects at the general election, which we're expecting later this year. And I think really what he's trying to say is there's everything to fight for, but I think we should be a little bit cautious about that suggestion.
What is it with
that
people
the local election results
wanting
suggest
Scottish
we're on
people
for
to
a
say
hung
burger alert alarm?
Harry Farley, thank you very much indeed. President Putin has ordered the Russian military to hold nuclear
I've got one of those conditions. The more you think about how you're saying something, you start going.
Meanwhile, frontline Ukrainian soldiers have told the BBC...
And then you can't say it right for the fucking for love of the money, man.
They say a failure to train and mobilise enough recruits means some have been fighting without a break since Russia's full-scale invasion more than 2 years ago.
Yes, baby!
The story.
You wonder they're getting it doing?
Under the green canopy of a Ukrainian spring, an artillery unit waits
Oh,
for
it's
their
this
next order.
dickhead.
Some of these men have been fighting for months, if
His
not
kid
years.
is really unlucky.
My men know
Like to
each
make it
vehicle,
ugly.
says their commander. It's like a woman with her own characteristics.
Get under the hood.
As Russian forces inch closer, they're hunkering down and waiting for billions of dollars worth of long-delayed American ammunition to finally be delivered. This time last year, Ukraine was preparing for a counter-offensive, but this time it's different. They're preparing for what might be coming. This ammunition will help, but Ukraine is also grappling with trying to mobilize enough men to replace these ones. Kiev is widening the call-up age, but radio operator Alexander,
And remember,
works and
folks,
lives in this
Britain
bunker,
and America are
thinks it's
going to
more
do
than
and
just a
give
numbers game.
fucking Ukraine endless dough.
If we all go
Endless!
home, inexperienced soldiers might be able to hold the line, but a lot of them will die.
In the nearby city of Kramatorsk, Ilya, a frontline medic, tells me officials are not honest with recruits who are thrown into the front line indefinitely with little training. He thinks there should be a limit on the toughest deployments.
It would be more truth and effective if military recruitment office would say, guy, you will have super hard job, infantry, but for example, for half a year. Then you'll go to next level training and you'll got more specific tasks to do.
Ministers are trying to restore trust in the way the army recruits, whilst turning up the pressure for men to sign up. Inna Sofsun is a Kiev MP.
Keep sending them your
fighting,
money.
And she thinks there are enough men to swap in and out from the front line.
Nobody's even talking about
more
the
people who are
prospect
not
of negotiation.
than those who are serving. And the numbers is not even 1-to-1. It's a much bigger ratio.
Just how much, by the fact, with the fact your husband, your partner is serving, how much has that shaped your view?
Of course, my understanding is shaped by who I am, by the fact that I, spend countless nights worrying about where my partner is, if he is okay, and so on and so forth.
It's an anxiety shared by millions of Ukrainians. Tired soldiers are torn between needing to defend their country and wanting to go home. James Waterhouse, BBC News.
Look at all Rupert Murdoch's gremlins, mate. I think she was telling me Piers Morgan wears Jesus sandals.
Having a
The
state visit there.
dope smoking,
shortly
Jesus
the
sandal
arrival of
wearing
Ursula von
hippie.
der Leyen, the European Commission president, who's expected to join the French
Next
president.
you'll be telling me the press aren't going
push for
after
fairer trade
Prince Harry
policies,
because he tried to
and
get
for
them all
China to
nailed
use
for
its
the
leverage
slime ball
with Russia
fucking
to end
phone
the
hacking
war in
that the
Ukraine.
press was
So we'll
doing
see whether we're
on a
continuing to
fucking
monitor this,
industrial scale
these
by
images
all
and meetings
accounts.
there in Paris.
Hacking
Please stay with
fucking
us
dead
beyond the
lassies, phones, family of dead people's phones. Piers Morgan was the tip of the spear of that, and he's a cockboy for Rupert Murdoch.
Sunshine out there for some of us.
And remember, if you've got bags of fucking cash, if you've got pals in the government and they drop a corporation tax here a wee bit, a corporation tax there a wee bit, it's not just a couple £100, it's millions if not billions of pounds extra in your pocket.
Slowly ease away through the day, and higher pressure is going to build in as we head through the rest of the week. But back to today then, for the rest of Monday, we've got that rain sitting across the southeast of England, fairly patchy in nature, but a few heavy
I don't
spells,
even think
particularly on
Rupert
thunderstorms, fairly
Murdoch
cloudy here.
pretend that he's fucking, that's no,
Devon and
but his
Cornwall in 2 Wales through the Midlands
running the
as well,
media
some sunny
empire
spells, but
for
also
the good of the
flickering of
country,
showers if you do
for the good of the world,
thundery.
or is he running it
Spots
for
are,
other
for instance,
reasons?
up to about 19 degrees.
Does it
We'll
serve
be looking at the mid-
other
to high
purposes?
teens. For Northern Ireland and Northern and Western Scotland, a fair amount of dry weather on the cards. Some sunshine, a bit more cloud working into the north here. But for Central and South East Scotland, you're going to keep the cloud. The rain will be easing out through the day. And into the evening hours, then most of us lose the showery rain. It'll slowly clear away from the southeast, but may just linger for the likes of Kent, for instance, to start your Tuesday morning. And there'll be some
That's
low
gonna
clouds,
be
some mist
what
and some fog patches,
bottom of the
especially
hour
in
news.
Scotland, where we've got that wet ground. Eastern England, for instance,
Out
as well,
again
for
a
the fog
year on,
patches.
but with a slight change of tack. A broader message of down with the crown, replacing not my king.
But it is about saying we're here and we are growing and we are making progress. We're seeing a drop in the polls for the monarchy. We're seeing a growth in the polls for the opposition. We saw a poll yesterday in Scotland saying most people want to get rid of the monarchy. So yeah, it's
That's
it's all up
hilarious. That's hilarious. It's now making a wee bit more sense
Given for King Charles.
why I heard
One of the reasons he wanted to make the
on
palace
talk
feel more
radio or whatever it's called now, earlier on them talking
Queen,
about
in recent
how
months,
support
playing host
for the
alone,
royal family
winning
has
praise for
increased.
stepping up,
Apart
as well as
from, of
continuing
course,
her own work.
who does Rupert Murdoch and his gremlins love to fucking go after 24/7, obsessing over? Meghan Markle and Harry. So they go after Meghan, he hurt Harry, and then they're going after Harry because he fucking got them, or some of them, or some accountability for the phone hacking
With his
stuff.
treatment ongoing, it's the doctors who are going to decide.
That's not a conspiracy. It's the shit that all went through the courts by a fucking prince.
to read it, I expect. The writing was always going to be small, every moment from their coronation written down, and no doubt forever etched on their minds. as they continue the work that they hope will really define their moment in history. Rhiannon Mills, Sky News.
Even the countryside.
Just
All
gone
your
9:23
farmers.
on a Monday morning.
All the
Still to
farmers
come.
I've came across and all that in my time have always
Talk of
typically
air
been
conditioning
from
units falling from the ceiling.
the right side of the
We'll speak to a music
PoliTITS.
journalist, Paul Stokes, about what's going on at Manchester's
Even up here in Scotland, it's very hard to like, be
Summit is round the
on
corner. Well,
the
there's
conservative
spectrum
spectrum in general in the inner cities. But you go to the sticks and all that, my vast majority are on the conservative side of things. Definitely. Right.
Change the fortunes of such countries in a positive way, rather it just brings problems on them. If you look at the case of Niger, for instance, where both the French and the US have military bases, that country has suffered more than most other countries, especially in the Sahel region.
Colonialism was
Obviously,
scrapped
there's no
everybody.
benefit they bring to us. They're being on the continent for their own selfish interests. They're not coming here to protect us. The reason being that their presence in the Sahel, both the US and the French, ought to have put a stop. They have superior intelligence. They have satellite to be able to monitor movements of the terrorists and to be able to say where they are. And to also, they also have the arms and whatever it takes to stop it. But did they stop it? Obviously not. We have seen clearly that the only interest they have is their own enlightened, selfish interest, not the interest of the countries they go to. It has gone on for so long, and the Africans are saying enough is enough. We are sovereign nations. We are tired of being told what to do only because of the West. Who are in any
It's always a good
case
sign of a sovereign
exploiting our
nation to
resources.
rely on French and American troops. And China and Russia have the eyes on Africa.
Well, that wraps up this news hour. Join Manila Chan on Modus Operandi up next, and we'll be back at the top of the hour.
Sober up, buddy. Right, let's see what the Yankee Doodle Dandies are saying here.
Invasion is imminent. The U.S. and world leaders have long discouraged an Israeli offensive there because of concerns about civilian casualties.
But Hamas has claimed responsibility for a deadly attack in that area in the last 24 hours. ABC's Em Nguyen is here with the latest. Em, good morning.
Andrea, good morning. The apparent decisions by Israel to enter Rafah may escalate already high tensions with the U.S.
May?
Breaking overnight, Israeli military officials urging Palestinians to evacuate parts of the southern Gaza city of Rafah ahead of an expected ground offensive by Israeli forces into the city, where more than 1 million civilians have sought shelter during the war. It comes just hours after Hamas claimed responsibility for a rocket attack at Gaza's southern border, at one of the few crossings where humanitarian aid enters the territory. 3 Israeli soldiers were reportedly killed. Prime Minister Netanyahu has vowed to enter Rafah to
something
flush out
different
Hamas
from the
fighters, defying international
British
pressure, including from the
reporting
US.
of
All
the
of
same
this as
thing
hopes for a
as to the
ceasefire and
ABC
hostage
reporting.
deal fade.
The BBC one didn't mention that I caught anything about the Hamas attacks at the Rafah border, and then just showed you 2 random rockets. Now, obviously, wasn't the attacks, the fucking setting the stage, you know what I mean?
A hostage and ceasefire deal.
The website Axios reports the Biden administration has paused a shipment of U.S.-made ammunition to Israel. The decision reportedly made last week, leaving Israel scrambling. But the reason behind the decision unclear. Back here in the U.S., police arresting more war protesters on college campuses. At least 25 arrested at the University of Virginia.
Did she just call them war protesters?
In Southern California, police clearing an encampment
It's the
at
usual
USC.
cadence, no anti-war protesters.
Last week, officials are now hiring the former
don't know.
Sacramento police chief to oversee the
Overthinking
school's
it.
police
Oh, it's
department.
Teen Park.
Back to Israel, the government has shut down the Al Jazeera news network, raiding its offices, calling the Qatari broadcaster an incitement channel. Al Jazeera called this a criminal action and insisted it follows professional media standards. Andrew.
Thank you. Now to the historic flooding in Texas. The rain may have stopped, but rivers are rising, and there's a new weather threat to the north today. This morning, the catastrophic flooding in Texas turning deadly south of Fort Worth.
Nice one looking line.
Police in
Tell
Johnson
me his hair
County say
looks
2 adults and a
spot on.
4-year-old boy were in a vehicle hit by fast-moving floodwater. A witness says all 3 trying to get out were swept away. The adults survived. The boy's body was found hours later.
So there's just a wee bit localised fucking
of rain in
doom
just a matter
and
of days.
gloom. Right, hold on, let me get this right. They've definitely ramped up the HARP machines, haven't they? That's our fucking flood in Kenya. Fucking it's always a record flood, isn't it? Record flood. How long have you been keeping records? 2 weeks. So record flood Kenya, one in Brazil, umpteen people dead. Now got from flooding in Texas. So live now on Fox. Oh, that's fucking. They've always got scary spice. I mean, is he just a spokesperson for the White House? The White House.
Incredibly painful time, and it is a very charged moment, and we understand how difficult that could be, and so I'll just leave it there. Is that your 3
That's
topics?
a replay.
Yes. Okay, all right. Excellent.
Thanks, Green. So you say that you haven't seen a
If you want to be my lover.
but I am told by a U.S. official that the U.S. has been briefed on some sort of initial plan. So can you just tell us what the reaction was to Israeli counterparts about that initial brief?
So I'm going to be super mindful. These conversations are, these are diplomatic conversations. We don't read out in details and specifics on the conversations that we have with certainly with all of our counterparts here. The last time there was a virtual meeting, we did have a readout there, but I don't want to go into details. We have been very clear in public and in private that our concerns with a large military operation into Rafah, we're not in support of that. And so obviously there's been conversations. There's been 2 virtual led conversations led by the National Security Advisor on this particular topic, Rafah operations. We read out to all of you the last time that the president spoke with the Prime Minister of Israel. Rafah operations came up in that conversations. We're not going to go into details from here, but I think we've made ourselves very clear. There are more than 1.5 million Palestinians who are seeking refuge there. And so we believe those lives need to be protected, and we're going to continue to have those conversations.
So to be clear, the U.S. was not satisfied with whatever
I'm not going to go into details or specifics from here. We've been clear about our concerns. We're going to continue to be clear about our concerns here. Those conversations are going to continue, and I'm just going to leave it there.
And just switching gears a little bit.
She's got a touch of the scary spice about her, I think.
4 in 10 Americans
I think it's just the hair.
doing too much to support Israel. That's up from about 3 in 10 in January. So it is showing that support for Israel is declining as the war drags on. Is the president concerned about this?
I'm not going to go into every poll that comes out. That's for political pundits to do. I used to be one. I'm not one anymore, standing here at this podium. But what I can say is
well
that
caught, looking like
we saw what happened.
No details, but we're very fucking clear that we're not going to get any details. Get it? Got it?
A leader from
Good.
that organization said they want to see.
I really want to. I really want to see Gaziga.
Again, more than 1,200 souls were taken on that day. More than 200 Israelis, including some American
What's the scores on the doors? George doors.
And as you know, we are working very hard to get that hostage deal so that we can bring hostages home, including those American hostages, create a situation where we have a ceasefire, right? So more humanitarian aid can go through. That is incredibly important. We're working around the clock to get that done. You saw Secretary Blinken in the region meeting with regional partners. And so that is certainly a priority and continues to be a priority for us. Our commitment to Israel's security is ironclad, as I've said, and we have said many times. They live in a tough neighborhood. And we saw what Iran did, right? They launched missiles and drones into Israel, and it wasn't just us that stepped in. It was leaders in the region that stepped in to make sure that they were able to defend themselves at that time.
Yeah,
and so
all your proxies using all the American-made anti-missile and anti-air technology.
That innocent Palestinian lives are protected. That's why we're looking into the Rafah operations and having those conversations. But getting that hostage deal is so critical to bring hostages home, to get that more humanitarian aid in, and to have a ceasefire. And we are committed to doing that, and you see that from this president.
morning. You said that the U.S. has been clear about concerns about invading Rafah. Has it been clear about potential consequences if Israel moves forward?
Look, I'm not going to go into speculations or what consequences might be. We've made our concerns publicly and privately to the Israeli government. I just mentioned the president had a conversation with the prime minister in his last call with him, and Rafah operations came up. I'm not going to go into specifics. I'm not going to go into
did you see
details.
that in the old Australia? A guy was radicalised
who are seeking refuge in Rafah, and we want to make sure those lives are protected. Understanding that Israel needs to also defend itself, and having those Hamas operators there, we understand that they want to dismantle Hamas, and we understand that is a priority, obviously, and we certainly appreciate that. We also want to make sure that those 1.5 million lives, Palestinian lives, who are seeking refuge there are protected. And we...
Oh, shit. It wasn't me. Oh, that will be copyrighted. The asshole. Let's get you out there with the very traditional stiff upper lip. He literally has got a stiff upper lip.
As you can tell, I'm sad that my time as First Minister is ended. But I am so...
And for the deaf out there, we've got Brave, the sign language women.
Afforded to so few to lead my country.
A week is a long time in politics. Last Monday, an emotional Humza Yousaf resigned, leaving the SNP looking for a new leader and Scotland a new First Minister. Focus quickly turned to who would replace him. In the frame, John Swinney and Kate Forbes.
I want to unite the SNP and unite Scotland for independence.
And Lex
Shortly
Luthor.
after Mr Swinney entered the contest, Ms Forbes said she wouldn't stand. Technically, the deadline for nominations is at midday, and as the only current contender and with the clock running down, it was widely expected that John Swinney would become the next SNP party leader and country's 7th First Minister unopposed. That was until a last-minute twist over the weekend.
SNP activist Graham McCormick was hoping to lodge a challenge for the leadership position. It's thought he collected signatures at a pro-independence march in Glasgow at the weekend. But no sooner had the bid launched, it was over. In a statement late last night, Mr McCormick said he'd met the nominations threshold to enter the contest, adding that after a lengthy and fruitful conversation with John Swinney, they had agreed on the challenges which the SNP, Scottish Government and people face. He described it as a fresh start to deliver Scottish independence. He said, "I have therefore concluded that I shall not proceed with my nomination for party leader," throwing his support behind John Swinney. Over the weekend, Mr Swinney insisted he was the right man for the job.
I feel physically and mentally ready to become the leader of the SNP and the First Minister of Scotland. And I will give it absolutely everything I have in me to make sure that my party succeeds and my country succeeds.
Events could move quickly again this week. With the path now clear, it's all but certain that John Swinney will be in the top job in the coming days. Ben Phillip, BBC News.
We need Superman to bring
Around the
down
world
Lex
and across
Luthor.
the UK, this is BBC News.
Stabbing, SNP and genocide. Just a normal Monday morning. Try to think where it would be. Let's see if Al Jazeera always throws you a wee curveball. And their offices were shut down yesterday.
And then you have infrastructure deficit, roads, educational institutions, healthcare services, name them. Everything is almost lacking in this country. And these are some of the issues the people here want to address. They also want the government, whoever takes power in this election, should address the issue of rising corruption in the country. Chad produces oil, and a lot of people who have spoken to say they don't know where the revenues are going to. Now, apart from that, we also have internal crisis. This is a deeply divided country. The last few weeks, the campaigning, the run-up to the referendum and post-referendum, we've seen people killed. We've seen several divisions, several cracks in unity in this country. And whoever wins this election will also have to address these particular issues. And apart from that, we understand that people are really, really desperate for the government to fix education and also jobs. We've spoken to university students. We understand that every year hundreds of students graduate from universities with no prospects of
My theory
getting
goes
jobs.
is they've just
Those we
handed
spoke
him
to
the
insist
poison
that
chalice
the government needs to do
to get
urgently
over the
before
hump
it reaches a crisis
of
point. Elizabeth?
Ahmed,
the
and
general
all of those
election,
issues that you mentioned, of course, have a big impact on the security of the country.
which is
And the security of the
which is
country is
looking
one of the
like
biggest reasons why the
it'll
West,
be a
why
shit
other
show for the
countries
SNP.
in that region
And
are
then
watching the
he'll hand
elections
the
so
back on
closely.
to Forehead Forbes to rebuild a broken party.
Exactly.
It's just
Everyone
my
is
theory.
watching this election very closely. Apart from the French, the former colonial power, Western countries are also watching what happens here. Probably the Americans are watching this closely. Remember, just a few weeks ago, the government insisted that the Americans, with their little or small group of soldiers
the
here, should
ex-colonial
leave the country.
powers
There are also reported
keeping
moves
an
that
eye
the
on the
countries
elections?
are moving towards military pact with
quite
countries like
figure
Russia.
it.
It's not clear how the French, former colonial power, will react to that, but they have been
See,
in
we
this
said that.
country
Can we say that anymore?
even before
Can we
independence,
get
and they have a lot
colonial
of troops
power
in this
drinking
country.
game coming on?
Security-wise, this is a very, very closely watched election. The movement or the departure of the Americans, and if it happens that more Western powers or more foreign powers leave the country, then definitely there will be a vacuum created in terms of security that could be exploited by the armed groups. We're not only dealing with armed groups like ISWAP, affiliates of ISIL and Boko Haram. There's also internal rebellion in Chad here. It's been as old as the country's independence itself. So basically, security is a very, very serious issue. Talk to every Chadian. They are happy that things have improved slightly, but they want
Funny how
more
all
to be
these wee
done in order to
telegrams just
secure
pop
lives and
up where I was
property in
like,
this country.
bunch
Ahmed,
of
thank you so
oil
much
or
for breaking all of that
ex-colonial
down for us.
powers.
Ahmed Idris, live for us in Jamina.
Cheers, Abdul.
The United States is in the process of withdrawing its forces from Niger. The country's military junta ended an agreement with Washington that allowed it to base its troops for operations in the region. As Mohammed Val reports from Niamey, Russia is looking to fill the gap.
This is not Moscow or one of its embassies abroad. It's a roundabout in Niger's
you
capital,
feel it
Niamey. And yes, that's
coming
Russia's
in the air
flag, along with those of
tonight?
Niger, Mali and Burkina Faso.
Oh,
The three
yeah.
Sahel states that broke away from their long-standing alliance with France, the former
they
colonial
don't
power
look
in the
crazy,
region,
don't they,
and created a new security
Like a guy
pact
with a
with
big
Russia.
skull.
The shift also involved walking away from a similar alliance with the United States. Wasting no time, the Russians are already here. At least 3 military cargo planes with training equipment and personnel have already arrived at the Niamey International Airport. On Friday, it was revealed that Russian troops had entered the same airbase near the airport where U.S. troops are stationed. The U.S. Secretary of
What could
Defense
possibly go
acknowledged the
wrong?
incident, but tried to minimize its importance.
The Russians are in a separate compound and don't have access to U.S. forces or access to our equipment.
The U.S. is in talks with Nigerian officials about an orderly withdrawal of up to 1,000 American soldiers who've been operating in Niger since 2013. They came here to train Niger's military on battling armed groups. In 2018, the U.S. built Drone Airbase 201 near the northern city of Agadez at the cost of $100 million. Now it has to abandon it. Niger ordered the American withdrawal after a dispute triggered by U.S. envoys reportedly talking about potential measures if Niger's ruling junta wouldn't reconsider plans to have closer ties with Russia and Iran. It's been a consistent U.S. stance since its initial operations in the Sahel region. But the move didn't go down well in Niamey.
The government of Niger regrets the expressed will of the U.S. delegation to deny our country its right to choose its diplomatic and strategic partners and the type of partnership that can help it in the fight against terrorists.
Propped up by a wave of popular antipathy towards
So
Western
there's Russia
superpower
are coming in
influence,
to save us
Niger's
from the
military rulers
terrorists
felt
again,
emboldened to
leaving
introduce
America
their
in
new
the butt.
policies in a decisive manner. They'd already kicked out thousands of French and
Remember,
European troops from
it's
the
not a
country.
world war that's happening.
But when the
everybody.
last US soldiers leave, some fear that Niger's under-equipped and
Russia
underprepared army,
isn't at war with the West,
only a
stroke
few
America
dozen
and
Russian
Syria,
advisors,
Ukraine,
might fail
or
to
in
hold
parts
its
of
ground
Africa,
in the
and there
face of a
certainly isn't
multitude
any
of
sort
armed
of a
groups that roam the
swinging
country's
dicks going on with
1.3
China,
million
although
square
there's a trade
kilometers
war going
of
on,
desert
so
land.
it's
Mohammed
quiet
Fahd,
about that.
Al
Just
Jazeera,
keep buying
Miami.
Huawei and McDonald's.
Panama's electoral authority has declared Jose Raul Molino the winner of Sunday's presidential elections. He maintained a comfortable lead ahead of the 7 other candidates. Molino entered the race at the last minute to replace former President Ricardo Martinelli, who was
but I think it's
disqualified.
like 60%
The election took place against a
the world's
backdrop of social
population
discontent, economic
is voting
slowdown,
this year,
and
has
drought.
voted, is voting, in the process of voting.
The number of people who've died in floods in southern Brazil has risen to
I heard those numbers
66,
before
with
then,
more than
and India
100
started
others
their
missing.
election.
Video has emerged of the moment a bridge collapsed as torrential
I
rain
think that's
swept
Brazil.
away roads and forced more than 80,000 people
66
to flee their homes. Water levels in the regional capital Porto Alegre continue to rise. More than 1 million people no longer have access to drinking water in the region's worst floods in 80 years. In Myanmar, weeks of fighting near the town of Myawaddy on the Thai border has forced tens of thousands of people into Thailand, but many more remain trapped inside the country. The UN estimates 2.5 million people have been displaced by fighting since the military seized power in a coup in 2021. In the second of his series of special reports from inside Myanmar, Tony Cheng witnessed the desperate conditions many of those people are living in.
Which sides each is
Forced out of their
own.
homes and now hiding from the heat. A group of displaced people sit in the shade. They've nowhere else to go. This is the 3rd time they've had to flee their village, close to the town of Kokore. Amongst them, Donopo, her daughters and grandchildren. They've been sheltering here for 3 weeks, with nothing but a bag of rice and some oil donated by the local temple.
They hadn't even arrived in our village before they started shelling us, and we were scared that the soldiers would shoot us. Last year, they were in our village. They loot anything valuable from our houses.
It's especially hard for the children. Most schools have been closed since the coup
Women
3
and
years
children.
ago, and constantly moving is deeply unsettling. Other basic services like healthcare are scarce too. An injured fighter is being treated for a shrapnel injury. He winces with pain as the doctor
It's like
treats
they were
and
putting a
dresses his
fucking worm
wound.
in it or something.
The clinic's hidden under the deep jungle canopy. The military has targeted anywhere it thinks might be helping the rebels. 24 hours a day, there's a constant buzz in the sky.
That's what the fighters say is a Y-12. It's a spotter plane that's up there looking for targets for artillery, but also capable of dropping barrel bombs.
The fighters know to stay out
dear.
of sight, slipping seamlessly under the cover of the trees and shrubs. The thud of explosions in the distance. Back at the clinic, a small truck arrives. Inside,
remember what
Ma
we were in at
Pan-A,
war.
in labour
That's got to
and
be-
moaning in pain. They
China's got
hurry
to be
her into the
influence,
surgery.
have
She and her
influence in there
family
as well.
are also displaced from their home.
I would
It took them
imagine.
7 hours to get to the clinic.
We had to carry her with a hammock. There were around 8 people carrying her down the mountain.
it does have
Then
a
we took a
border with
car
China.
along the rough jungle road. It was so difficult. We didn't know how to relieve her pain.
They put her on a drip, but there's only so much the doctor can do. He's worried the long journey may have harmed the expecting mother and the baby inside.
No, I think
Very
that's part
quickly
of
the child
India.
is born,
Aye,
but
that's
it's
part
not
of India
breathing.
there. So it shares
Its
a
skin colour is
border with
turning
India.
purple.
China.
The doctor quickly gets to work
Laos,
as vital seconds tick away.
Thailand.
And then the sound everyone has been hoping to hear. Smiles and relief for the family and the medical staff. But a new arrival in a very uncertain world.
I
Tony
don't
Cheng,
know-
Al Jazeera,
I
Cayenne
don't
State,
really know much
Myanmar.
about that conflict at all. So I don't
And
know
in
who
the
the
third of our
players are
special
or
reports
not.
from inside
Just where
Myanmar,
it's
Tony Cheng meets some of the people who
situated,
fled the
you'd
military
imagine
junta's new
it's
conscription
on
law
China's border,
and chosen
so we've got to be
instead
concerned
to
about
fight
who is and
against
is not
them.
in control.
China's President Xi Jinping is due to hold talks with French President Emmanuel Macron in his first visit to Europe in 5 years. They're set to discuss trade amid growing tension between Europe and China, including over what the EU sees as an imbalance between China's exports and its European imports. Macron is also expected to push the Chinese president to use his influence with Vladimir Putin over the war in Ukraine. That's it for me, Elizabeth Puranam, for this half hour of news, but do stay with us. The Listening Post is coming up next.
We're on the precipice, possibly, of a full-scale invasion of Rafah by Israeli forces. We know how disastrous that could be. What kind of questions should American journalists be asking of the administration, the State Department, those officials now?
Haiti's at war again. But
Well,
again,
to be fair,
we're not
some of my
all
colleagues
war,
in State
everybody.
Department briefing,
Just
Matt
buy
Lee from
Huawei,
AP and Saeed
vodka,
Arikat,
and eating
and Ryan
McDonald's.
Grimm and Prem Taka. There have been some great questions. I don't know if your viewers have watched some of them. They're worth watching. But look, as a whole, the press corps needs to do much more to hold this administration to account for its direct role in the atrocities. For far too long, for far too many months, we've simply reported on leaks out of the White House. Joe Biden's very upset with Benjamin Netanyahu. Joe Biden dropped an F-bomb on Benjamin Netanyahu. Joe Biden's very reluctant. That's not good enough, right? We need to publicly hold the administration to account. Biden, Blinken, all of
we know what's going on in Haiti. Well,
to support itself.
What I was going to say is America's fingerprints. I wouldn't say I know what's going on down there inside out, but I do know America's fingerprints are all over that gaff. Apart from that, I don't really know much more about who's in their influence. It's in the locals to fight for their ideology. Double bombs and bullets. But 4 more minutes and we can catch top of the hour news. If we go home, a lot of inexperienced soldiers will die.
Do you think you might be becoming a role?
I like to think that I've got a positive influence over people who are maybe losing their sight, parents of kids who are losing their sight, reassuring people that disability isn't something to be scared of. That's my ultimate aim.
So you came to university here in Chichester.
Yes. Oh God, the cobbled streets.
And you don't have a guide dog?
No, I'm a cane user. I love my cane. Michael Caine is my best friend in the world.
All right, fellas, let's go for a walk down Chichester Canal. First off, got to navigate these barriers. Me and Michael Caine are having a rough time, but we get through. Here I'm brushing the grass on my left to make sure that I don't fall in the canal. Not really fancying that one today.
I don't ever want people to look at my content and think that blindness is a walk in the park because I put a smile on my face. I think it's really important to recognise that it's a tough journey and you have to do a lot of
Oh man,
work on
it's near
yourself to
got
be
me
able to
greeting.
be content with your life and fully accept your disability.
He's going to even go explode even more now he's been on the BBC's. Oh, what a lovely story. Right, let's see what
Of weather types through the bank holiday Monday. We have got some warm sunshine out there for some of us, but in other areas, some pretty heavy downpours and more persistent rain around, particularly across the southeast of England and southeast Scotland.
Don't want to
as
get technical
well,
about the
close to
weather,
areas
but
of low pressure that are still driving our weather at the moment. This low pressure towards the south will slowly ease away through the day, and higher pressure is going to build in as we head through the rest of the week. But back to today, then, for the rest of Monday, we've got that rain
lying.
across the southeast
I
of
wouldn't
England.
want to
Fairly
go and
patchy
stay in
nature,
Russia
but a few
or
heavy spells.
fucking,
There could be the odd thunderstorms. Fairly cloudy here.
where else?
There'll be more sunshine through parts
China.
of Devon
No
and Cornwall,
taking
into
chance,
Wales,
man.
through the Midlands as well. So sunny spells, but also a
Pretty sure
peppering of showers.
he became a citizen or whatever. I don't know the
Thundering.
technicalities
Some of the
yet,
warmest
but
spots, Hull,
they've
for
got some
instance, up
form
to
of
about
conscription
19
and all
degrees,
that going on in
particularly
Russia right now as
high
well.
teens. For Northern Ireland and northern and western Scotland, a fair amount of dry weather on the cards. Some sunshine,
Because
but
of
more
what's
cloud
happening
working
in
into the north
Ukraine,
here.
their
But
whole
for
economy's
central and
kind of
southeast
been
Scotland, you're going to
geared
keep the
towards
cloud. The rain will be
feeding
easing
the
out through
military.
the day. And into the evening hours, then most of us lose the showery rain. It'll slowly clear away from the southeast, but may
big
just linger for
blanket
the
of
likes of Kent, for
bacon.
instance, to start your Tuesday morning. And there'll be some low clouds, some
Cloud
mist
all
and some
day.
fog patches, especially for Scotland, where we've got that wet ground. Eastern England, for instance, as well, a few fog patches towards the southwest. But it should brighten up through the day tomorrow, so some sunny spells for many of us. Still some showers bubbling up through the day, but they won't be as heavy or as frequent as the showers we've got out there today. Top temperatures probably a degree or so warmer, 19, 20 degrees for some of us. But if you are stuck under the cloud across parts of Scotland, for instance, about 13 for Aberdeen.
Cloudy and rainy.
Now into Wednesday, high pressure is building in, so it's squeezing away most of the showers. A lot of dry weather for England and Wales. Can't rule out the odd showery spell, but for most places, a much drier spell of weather. A bit more cloud working in from the northwest ahead of this area of rain. But top temperatures quite widely around 19 or 20 degrees. And then high pressure stays.
Let's see the RT top it. What are they going to pick off with Ukraine stuff or Rafah? It's got to be one of the two. And our couple of wee war zones that the editors in the West aren't quite wanting people to think about right now, you know? Shit.
That it is not the Ukrainians who are at war. They are only a tool. Their bodies mean nothing.
Moscow says the West has admitted to using Kyiv as a tool to fight against Russia. That's as Ukraine forces people with physical disabilities and mental illnesses into the army to increase the numbers.
This is Russia's priorities.
The UN denounces Israel's decision to expel the news broadcaster Al Jazeera. There are concerns that banning the Qatar-based news outlet could undermine Israel's negotiations with Hamas. And as the Chinese leader is on his first official tour of Europe in 5 years, France wants to increase access to China's market, while at the same time increasing its military presence in nearby Japan. Live from our International News Center in Moscow, this is RT. Welcome to the Global News Hour. We start this hour with news from Russia's Belgorod region, near the Ukrainian border. 7 people were killed and at least 40 wounded, including 3 children, in a Ukrainian drone attack. Now, that's according to local authorities. The kamikaze drone strike is said to have targeted vehicles used by a local agricultural company. One victim is in serious condition and is undergoing an urgent surgery. Moscow's top diplomat says it is not the Ukrainians who are at war, but rather the collective West is using them as a tool in a proxy conflict against Russia. He points out that Western powers are no longer talking about a supposed victory over Russia. They're only seeking to prevent themselves from being defeated.
We are now hearing Western figures admit that things are getting harder and harder in Ukraine. This is a rather eloquent characterization of the fact that their line to inflict a strategic defeat, as they say, upon Russia is doomed to failure. The most far-sighted and just plain smart and serious politicians in the West realize this. But the weapons that are going to Ukraine are being assembled literally all over the world. More than 50 countries are involved in this work. The head of the Pentagon, Lloyd Austin, said a few days ago that they would never be defeated. That is, they are no longer talking about defeating Russia, but about them not being defeated. In essence, Austin recognized that it is not the Ukrainians who are at war. They are only a tool. Their bodies mean nothing. The West constantly emphasizes that it will not let its own citizens die in the Donbass, but maybe do what is possible so that fewer Ukrainians die in the Donbass. That is racist logic. I do not even want to talk about it.
Russia is continuing to advance against Ukrainian forces on the front lines, with territorial gains further pushing back Kyiv's troops. This footage shows Russian airstrikes on Ukrainian military positions with missiles fired by a helicopter crew. Meanwhile, Ukraine's patrons in Washington anticipate even more Russian victories on the battlefield.
Some war porn.
First, Ukraine is in a hole, and it's in a hole in no small part because of the delay in the U.S. being able to provide
food, water, tents, additional humanitarian supplies. That is going to be treated with some skepticism by international aid agencies. In fact, I can tell you that a spokesman for the Norwegian Refugee Council has said that humanitarian facilities in this so-called humanitarian area are woefully inadequate. So they're not going to take this without serious criticism. And I should tell you that the IDF is telling people to return to areas that have been badly damaged in the fighting already. The city of Khan Yunis was laid
See
under
that pile of rubble
siege
over there?
in
Go and pitch your
January.
tent on that.
Parts of it have been very badly
See
damaged.
that thing that used to be
indeed.
your home?
The significance of this, I think, is clear. We are standing on the brink of another mass
It's called a
migration
humanitarian zone.
in Gaza.
Don't play in the
in
burnt down
Rafah.
rubble of
We're
your
talking
house.
about 1.2, maybe 1.4 million civilians crowded into this area, seeking sanctuary from the war. They're being asked to move again to the north. And I think Israel is going to test the absolute limits of the international support that it does receive from Western countries. I can tell you that a spokesperson for the Australian Foreign Ministry has warned the Israelis not to go down this path this morning. And you look at what the Americans have said. Last week, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said he didn't believe Israel had a credible plan to deal with and to look after civilians if they go ahead with this Rafah incursion. So I think they are going to absolutely test the limits of the support that it does receive in the international community if it goes ahead with this.
John, thanks very much. Let's just take you from the Middle East to Paris, where the French President, Emmanuel Macron, is welcoming China's Xi Jinping for a two-day state visit. This visit is aimed at rebuilding relations at a time of global tensions, and after France today and Tuesday, the Chinese leader will head to Serbia and Hungary. They're going to have bilateral talks at the Elysee Palace today. There will also be a French-Chinese economic forum, a state dinner this evening, and also today a formal ceremony at the Invalides Monument. Well, let's talk to Nicole Johnson, our Beijing correspondent, looking at these images with us. Nicole, how are these going to play out in China?
It's interesting that he's going to Serbia and Hungary, because those two countries would have to put infrastructure to them if the One Belt, One Road initiative wanted to reach Germany.
China historically have had a warmer relationship than China has had with some other European countries. But this trip,
You've dropped your camera, pal.
Projecting China's power in Europe is about trying to stabilise that relationship, because it's
Did you see that then? That was
period.
coming from
The Chinese
Associated
president
Press,
hasn't
AP.
been in Europe for 5 years, not since the time before COVID. And since then, we have had the Russian.
Well, up until last night, really, it seemed that these talks could result, from an optimistic point of view, in some kind of ceasefire, albeit...
Because remember, they did shut down Al Jazeera inside Israel yesterday.
We are hearing reports in the Israeli media now that the Rafah operation was
No,
approved
just like past the law, they went into their offices and confiscated all their equipment and stuff.
Last night. And we have to remind
freedom
this is the most
and
far-right
democracy
government that has ever existed in Israel, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu seems more than happy to embrace all of the pressure
Bitcoin. You never know, mate. I keep mine all banked and frozen just in case.
Even if it crucially hinders the safety of their own Israeli hostages, the Israeli captives being held by Hamas in the areas where this operation is being carried out. There was a glimmer of hope from the Israeli defense minister days earlier, when he seemed to be pushing Netanyahu.
If those hostages are gone,
bring a
there is no reason why Israel wouldn't
secure the release of the hostages.
flatten the place and everybody in it, and it looks like they're
counterpart, U.S. Secretary
willing
of
to do it.
Defense Lloyd Austin, in a phone call, that Israel was left with no choice but to launch its offensive in southern Gaza's Rafah, blaming Hamas once again for stalling the ceasefire talks, shifting blame once again for this disproportional violence that Israel is carrying out on Hamas, using Hamas as an excuse to continue to attack primarily civilian targets. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, it has to be said, has been clear in recent days and weeks that whether or not the ceasefire talks took hold, whether or not the hostages, the so-called hostages, were released, the Israeli captives were released by Hamas, they were still going to send military into Rafah. And that seems to be what we're seeing play out right now. So people are asking, with this massive escalation that's been happening in Rafah for several days, that hit a fever pitch last night, there was intense bombardment in the area. With ongoing escalation by military units in the occupied West Bank, people are asking the question, were these escalations militarily meant to help Israel negotiate from a position of power, or were the negotiations simply a distraction to try to push forward with Israel's military goals in the occupied West Bank and in Gaza?
Yeah, very important questions and context. Zain, thank you so much. Zain Basravi, live in Ramallah. Israeli strikes on Rafah have claimed another 26 lives, including 8 women and 11 children. 11 homes in Rafah were targeted. The deaths include a 7-month-old baby who had already lost his parents.
Oh,
Survivors
man,
were taken to Abu Yusuf al-Najjar hospital in the city. Israeli police have raided Al Jazeera's workspace in occupied East Jerusalem and seized its equipment.
No.
Benjamin Netanyahu's cabinet voted to shut down the network's operations in Israel.
You can see Al Jazeera now has a dog in the fight to go after the Israeli government. Just like Rupert Murdoch and Piers Morgan have a very big dog in the fight to go after Prince Harry. It's nothing to do with politics, it's to do that he went after them and fingered them for phone hacking.
Netanyahu's cabinet voted to shut down the network's operations.
Freedom! It's the only democracy in the Middle East.
Unanimously agreed upon includes confiscating its broadcast equipment, preventing the network's broadcast.
Oh man, next Saturday, old film. Fuck knows.
The government has now unanimously ordered the
Fuck
closure
knows.
of the incitement
Even if we give them a doing,
Israel.
they're still going to be ahead of us in goal difference.
Al Jazeera's broadcast was
They
taken
need to
off
beat them by
Israel's
5
main
goals.
cable provider in the
They've
hours
got,
after the order.
I think it's a 5
Measure
goal,
will last for 45
a
days,
plus 5 goal advantage over us,
possibility
if
of an
that makes sense.
extension for an additional 45
And 3
days.
points.
In a
So we
statement,
need
Al
5-0
Jazeera
to
Media
like draw with
Network
them.
condemned the measure, saying in part,
Parky.
Israel's ongoing suppression of the free
Old
press
firms
is seen as
might
an
as well
effort to
toss a
conceal
coin, man.
actions
It could
in
go
the
either
Gaza
way.
Strip stands in contravention of
Still
international
at least
and
stick a wee-
humanitarian law.
a wee
Israel's
line on
direct
Rangers to win,
targeting
that's
and
for sure.
killing of
We'll get
journalists,
good odds.
arrests, intimidation, and threats will not deter Al Jazeera from its commitment to cover. Whilst more than 140 Palestinian journalists have been killed since the beginning of the war on Gaza. The network vehemently rejects the allegations presented by Israeli authorities, suggesting professional media standards have been violated. Last month, the White House said Israel's plans to close the network were, quote, concerning.
A move like this is concerning. We believe in the freedom of the press. It is critical. It is critically important, and the United States supports the critically important work journalists around the world do. And that includes those who are reporting in the conflict in Gaza.
The widely criticized move was also
Just managed to get
condemned by the
3.5
Foreign Press
to 1
Association,
for Rangers to win.
urged the Israeli government to reverse what it called a harmful step.
So I'm going to be on the money.
That this
Put
was
a
a
whole
dark
50 pence
day
on
for
it.
the media and a dark day for democracy. Hamda Salhout, Al Jazeera.
You know what?
Let's bring in Omar Ashour. He's a professor of security and
I'm just
military
glad
studies
that
at the Doha Institute
the old
for Graduate
firm's a wee
Studies.
bit
Thank you
closer
for
this season.
being with us this very important morning as we discuss what this possible
And
Israeli
obviously,
operation
being
in
a
Rafah,
current
which
bun,
they have been warning
I'm going to
about
say
for
since
months now,
Philippe
could
came
entail.
in,
They say that it would be a
Rangers
limited
have
operation, but
got
given
more
that we've
points than
seen what
Celtic.
Israel's
So Philippe
limited
started
when it says targeted operations,
when
what they look
Big
like,
Baldy Philippe
widespread civilian deaths,
was there.
injuries,
We would be
infrastructure-
ahead of
infrastructure
Celtic.
damage. What are they planning
Silver
to do? What do
lining.
you think it will entail?
This is how we spin
in Al
it.
Jazeera, but unfortunately, I
That
need a
is
bit
how
of,
I
bad
spun
news.
it.
This does not look to me like a small operation at all, or as a surgical operation. This is at least a 2-division-sized operation in an area that is extremely small, 65 square kilometers. This
It's
is
going
the
to
whole
level the gap.
area of Rafah
We're
government.
probably going to be able to watch it live.
What does that entail?
We're talking about 6 brigades, so roughly about 30,000 people.
30,000 soldiers.
30,000 soldiers, yeah.
Yeah.
So 30,000 soldiers, and they are regular soldiers. They're not reservists. This is like the tip of the sphere of the Israeli army. So we're talking about the 89th Commando Brigade, which is the Special Forces Brigade. We were talking about one of the reserve paratroopers brigades, the 551st. And also, we're talking about the 2 armored brigades. So the
Sounds like it's going to be a good start to the week.
First armored. We're also talking about 2 mechanized infantry brigades. This is the Jifati, the 84th, and the 933rd. So this is a very significant and capable force. They will not be alone. They will be supported with airstrikes. They will be supported with artillery strikes. And
mate, I've learned my lesson. I don't gamble with big money at all. I don't.
More. So we were talking about an operation the size.
Because every time I put a bet on, I'm sitting there like, I'm convinced I'm going to win. So you're willing to fucking throw money that you genuinely can't afford.
It will be a very, very
so I just
operation.
keep it as fun and play for pennies.
Is we're talking about a very
nowadays I don't really put any more than 50 pence or a pound.
21,000 persons per square kilometre.
Yeah.
And if that evacuation did not go through
who was it screwed you at 20 quid?
Smoothly, then we're likely to see a very high civilian casualty.
And it's impossible to see how an evacuation.
Bayern Munich, they're top the Champions League.
Given even before what's
the
happened
other week, last Tuesday, I think it was last Tuesday, I had
places in the world. Now, what is it that
8 or 9 10-fold accumulator? Fucking Bayern Munich fucked me, man, because they drew with Real, I think it was, wasn't it?
In Rafah that it is going after in terms of, is it all of the Hamas fighters that it can find?
I think they were going for about 4 objectives. The first objective is not the hostages, actually. I think the priority objective is to destroy whatever is left of the Qassam battalions in Gaza.
Qassam is Hamas's military wing.
Yes, the Ezzeddin Qassam battalions, not brigades, they call themselves Kataib, which is battalions. So they aim for 4 battalions there. They called them, one in Yabana, one in Shabura, one in east of Rafah, and one in the city of Rafah. So this is what they're aiming for, mainly the leadership of these battalions there. And they believe these battalions, as opposed to the ones in the center and in the north, have some significant capabilities, and they want to go after them and probably destroy them. Second thing is the leadership of Hamas. They believe that the leadership of, the political leadership and part of the military leadership is somewhere in Rafah. We're not sure about that, but they claim so. The third thing is the hostages. The third objective is to try to get out the rest of the captives.
And it's only ceasefires that have got most of the hostages out.
Absolutely. 105 of the 253 initial hostages came out. Only 3 were relieved by force.
Yeah.
And they killed, I think, somewhere between 3, this is the direct fire, and almost 12 indirect fire by using force. So we're not sure how successful would that be. And then finally,
firing in the dark, is it as simple as that?
The Philadelphia corridor, the borders between Gaza Strip and the Sinai, and they want to control it for a while to make sure that there are no underground tunnels and any logistical support coming from the Sinai to Gaza. So I think this is the objectives of the operations, but it looks to me that given the size of the force and the size of Hamas force and the achievements so far in this, we're not finished with they're not finished with Deir al-Balah yet, or places like places that they entered on the 27th of October, like Beit Lahia and Beit Hanun in the north. They're still fighting there.
So many important questions remaining. I'm afraid we've run out of time, but no doubt we'll pick them up with you throughout the day. Omar Ashur, thank you as always. Still ahead.
No idea why Israel kicked fucking shut down Al Jazeera.
Winner in Sunday's presidential election.
Panama is holding an election.
You go on the government FCDO website, it says it does not recommend travel to Iraq. There's only one region.
But we'll send the illegals there.
That people could travel to, and even then they only say it needs to be essential travel only.
I think my moon idea is the best one.
Anywhere in the country
and we can use all the illegals to start colonising the moon. And if some of them die in the process of getting colonisation up there in front of the Chinas, who cares? They might die in a boat anyway. So, as soon as they come into the UK, process them, fucking strap them to a big firework, a rocket, and launch them to the fucking moon.
Take a look at what she had to say.
With an oxygen tank,
aware of those
a pack of
details.
seeds, and a bottle of water.
Is around Rwanda, and
See what happens? They could be pioneers. These illegal people could fucking go down in history.
once those flights take off, there will be a steady drumbeat of flights going on a
They're,
regular basis.
they're used to taking risky journeys with bouncing on the boats across the channel.
Other countries
So this time we can just launch them at the moon.
Rwanda plan working, but
Perfect
also
plan.
tackling immigration.
I think I'd be a bigger vote winner than
for example,
Rwanda.
Albanian illegal migrants are down 90%. So there is work going on with other countries, but the focus at the moment is getting those flights off the ground.
Now, Sky News has approached the Home
Jabber,
Office and the
jabber.
government for
Same
an
old,
official
same old.
response. They did respond, but the response was essentially about the Rwanda plan, saying, we've got the Rwanda plan, we're going to get it off the ground, our focus is delivering the Rwanda plan. So not really any comment about the possibility of using Iraq as a third country for processing asylum seekers. Now, what was also interestingly revealed in this document leak to Sky News was the fact that when it came to the Rwanda plan, high-ranking officials had given guidance that essentially said the government needed to be prepared to pay over the odds to get the Rwanda plan off the ground, and that the initial offer from Rwanda for this policy was actually a modest sum in these high-ranking officials' view, essentially. Now that's
hey, Shunak, got an offer for you, man. Sort us out with a gun, a box of fucking bullets, and I can help you out with your problem, my man.
And then it could potentially reduce after that if we got past the 300 mark. Many people say we'll never actually get to that point. So it's an incredibly expensive policy. And officials saying here, if you want to get this
save you a fortune,
you're going to have to be prepared to pay through the nose.
Mari, thanks very much. Well, if you're interested in politics, why don't you listen to the latest episode of Politics at Jack and Sam's? It's our podcast. If you scan the QR code on your screen right now, you can hear our deputy political editor.
Oh my God, I honestly think if I watched Alex Jones nowadays, buddy, I would fucking have a heart attack.
How the political parties will be battling over
just
the
not a relaxing experience.
Results,
you know?
and also predict that the UK could come out of recession this week. You can follow Politics at Jack and Sam's wherever you get podcasts.
He has got some delivery style, and that's for sure.
News this morning, relatives of 3 tourists who were reported missing in Mexico last weekend have identified their bodies. The remains of 2 Australian brothers and an American were found in a well not far from where they were last seen in Baja, California. Investigators say the men, who were surfers, had been shot. 3 people have been charged.
Just another day in America.
Rains have eased around the US city of Houston, which is experiencing severe flooding.
Hey, my city!
Expected later in the week. High flood waters left hundreds of people in need of being rescued or evacuated. A 5-year-old boy was killed in the nearby city of Fort Worth. Rail and tram passengers in the UK face a week of disruption. Members of the Train Drivers Union ASLEF will begin a 6...
Fuck me.
They will also stage...
Or a reprivatisation hokey-cokey's going to go on, isn't it?
4 men have been charged with
so all these
drugs after
companies that have made billions of pounds in profit by buying up our railways are now going to be able to sell them back to us for God knows fucking double, triple the price. Because the government, they know they've got a gun to the government's head because the government's already promised it. Thus they can basically say whatever price they want.
4 men have been charged in connection with a huge amount of cocaine that was found within the van that was parked in a pub car park in East Yorkshire in the Lely village, a tiny, tiny village.
What was the labelling? They just clock the labels?
500 kilos of cocaine at the Stag's Head Inn. They're interested in this specific location because it's 18 miles away from a beach, and officers believed at the time that the drugs may have been transferred from a rib that had been travelling from a larger vessel that had been moored off the Hull coast. And as you say, those 4 men have now been charged. 3 of those men hailing from West Coast Scotland and 1 of them from Colombia. They're Daniel Livingston,
lucky boys.
They will all appear at Hull Magistrates Court later today. It comes at the same time, though, that the
Told you we
crew
ruled the world.
on board the HMS Trent, the Royal Navy's HMS
These are
Trent,
names.
seized £204 million worth of cocaine following a pursuit in the Caribbean Sea. That's the crew that was on board.
Weird
this
thing,
vessel, and it is a
nowadays,
gigantic operation
those
in which they
soldiers
managed to
probably
undertake.
snort just as
They had
much as they
been-
confiscate.
well, first of all, it's said to be one of the largest
I'd like to see
seizures
the,
in recent
I'd like to see the
memory,
figures on
and
that.
it followed a close inspection of a suspicious vessel that they had been following off the coast of Martinique, and they noticed that this giant vessel had been throwing what looked like bales of cocaine overboard. And once they tracked them down, they managed to sort of comb the seabed and managed to
Well,
fish out some 2.5
I don't think that's going to
tons of
affect the prices at all, buddy.
and went on to
I mean,
seize
cocaine
the men
is
on
the
board and
fucking-
also what they had
You
been
never really have a problem
But this
getting it
hunt,
anymore, man.
for drug smuggling by the Royal
In
Navy
fact, what
on
night
board
was
this
it?
particular vessel
Friday
has been
night.
ongoing now since
Speaking to
December. So
ya.
they've had a good 5 months.
It was either 62 or 72. I think it was even 72, man, and he looked good on it. Didn't he look fucking 72?
Which potentially
And he starts telling me how he loves a good bit of, he loves his sniffing and all that. And then he ended up sorting me out with a wee patsy.
Sky News today, coming up, there are going to be gun salutes today to mark the 1-year
I'd love
anniversary
fucking Glasgow,
of the
man.
King's coronation.
And this is in the hipsters' paradise area, right? Where you kind of get a mix of all sorts of students, hipsters, and old boys as well. Before it turned into a hipsters' paradise. And old boys started chanting to him. In fact, I've actually got his, I won't say his full name, but his surname, man, Wallace. So, that's them. Broke down that push. Let's see a wee bit more about
and it will
Ukraine.
take time to dig out of that hole. So I do expect to see continued Russian advances in the coming period because you can't instantly flip the switch. They've got to essentially
See the Yankee Doodle Dandies or else
recapitalize
Biden live.
their force with the material we're sending into them to be able to reverse.
And our obligation to those who have been condemned or counted out. Thank you, Father Grave, for your amazing
Medal of
courage.
Freedom. Now, there's your Medal of Freedom. Just don't use TikTok, watch RT, or press TV. Freedom!
That you wish you'd never had to be an event like this one without a piece of your soul having been gone. Judy Shepherd. It's been 25 years, Judy, since
It says Empire, not the Dundee neck of the wood looking.
is here today as well. The brutal murder of your son galvanized the movement into a law in his name, protect LGBTQ.
His mumbling is fucking spectacular, isn't it?
Relentless advocacy is a reminder that we must give hate no safe harbor, and that we can turn it into purpose, and that pain you follow into significant purpose. You've done just that. Thank you.
How they gave this guy the job.
And his families.
An
Army veteran
guy can't speak.
Segregation in Mississippi to deliver the promise of
This is no editing, straight up audio from live now from Fox. Fox News do have a dog in the fight to make this.
Rena, who was 8 years old when she walked out and saw Daddy in the driveway. It's taken from her 4 days before Father's Day. She's here on behalf of the family and her mother, her mother Merle, who is unable to attend to travel today. I want to thank Merle for her work to seek.
I think that's why we don't see a lot of him over here in the British press, because it's fucking scandalous, man. It's fucking funny. Dundee is fucking junkie central. Dundee and Glasgow, two of the poorest areas in Scotland, and two of the areas in Scotland with the highest drug problems, abuse, use, whatever way you want to.
And the extraordinary capacity to emerge from the most painful moments with a better vision of ourselves. Miss Opal-Lee made it her mission to make history, not erase it. We're a better nation because
right. Are they giving him? Are they allowing him to smoke weed to stop his fucking Alzheimer shakes and all that? Because every time I see him, especially George Bush as well, yeah, it's almost like he's in a cowboy film. That squint like that, man. Open your fucking eyes, Sleepy Joe.
Included in the dream that will be ever engraved in the ethos of America. Letting freedom ring.
Right.
Dr. Clarence B. Jones.
He's just mumbling pish. Let's see, what's the fucking Aussies saying here?
Best job today, Genevieve. Enjoy, and thanks for having a chat.
Sure do.
An actor dies. Hong Kong. That's aimed at your Asian, English-speaking Asia market. Is that vapes or something? Talking about vapes.
Through the week ahead, and it'll be warming up. We could see those temperatures in the mid-20s by next weekend. Bye-bye.
On things like sexual violence.
I can only imagine her role has changed drastically in the last year, but the fact that she has still kept to her passion, I just think shows what a dedicated person that she is.
This week we saw him back to work. He wants to do as much as he can, but with his treatment ongoing, it's the doctors who are going to decide.
Goes for miles. Goodness me, I'm not going to attempt to read it in that respect.
The writing was always going to be small, every moment from their coronation written down, and no doubt forever etched on their minds as they continue the work that they hope will really define their moment in history. Rhiannon Mills, Sky News.
Either my fucking mouse is just broke or the battery's died, man.
It's a bit damp out there this bank holiday Monday. Showers or longer spells of rain for many today. It'll be drier tomorrow, though, when you go back to work. Cool in the north, fairly warm elsewhere. Britain will see widespread showers this afternoon, some heavy and thundery, and there'll be some more prolonged rain across parts of the southeast. Northern Scotland, Northern Ireland and Ireland will be mainly dry. It'll be quite cloudy for many, but Wales, Central England and Western Scotland can expect some good sunny spells, while eastern parts of Ireland and Northern Ireland should brighten up later.
Thank
You're
you.
watching Sky News today.
Al Jazeera does bottom of the half-hour news.
Despite a long history of supporting the Palestinian cause. A relationship fueled in part by a shared mistrust of another regional power, Turkey. But in light of Israel's war on
Maybe he's
Gaza,
clocked this, or maybe it's just because I've been listening to a wee bit of Al Jazeera and stuff. We here in the UK know Turkey is Turkey. But I've clocked it. I'm assuming now it might be Al Jazeera that I've heard it on. But they keep calling, or they are calling Turkey, Turkiya.
Hugo Scarpatritis, welcome to Talk to Al Jazeera.
It's a pleasure and honor. Thank you for the invitation, Neil.
We're staring at the precipice of a potential full-blown Israeli invasion of Rafah in southern Gaza, causing huge concerns about the implications on the humanitarian situation there, the civilian population there, so much so that even the United States, a staunch ally of Israel, has urged Israel to show restraint. As another ally of Israel, what conversations are you having with your Israeli counterparts, specifically about Rafah and the conflict?
When you're an ally, I think you have to be very honest, very open, very frank and sincere. So our main point is that any sort of invasion to Rafah should be avoided and prevented. At the moment, there is a huge accumulation of population in Rafah. It's a very overcrowded region. And any sort of invasion could cause a dramatic humanitarian crisis, which we need to avoid. So our advice is that this should be prevented by any possible means. What I really want to say is that at this moment, we're just at a very crucial juncture. It's a difficult situation that we're encountering because of the overall spillover effect in the region. We have the situation in Lebanon, the situation in Syria, in Red Sea. Obviously, we had the incidents with Iran. But at this very moment, all parties need to have a very high level of self-restraint.
Talking about self-restraint, this must be an incredibly difficult diplomatic position that Greece has been put in recently. To quote Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis, who back in November said of Israel, quote, "Sometimes friends have to speak hard truths to friends. That was 5 months ago. Has Israel been listening to any of those truths?
What I have to say is that in this position, you have to be very open, but you have to be a rule-based ally, I think. And from the very first day, we had the opportunity to be very open, but also very principled in our policy. We didn't take any side. What we said was that we need to disassociate the terrorist attacks, the Hamas organization, from the Palestinian people. We said that the Israelis had the right to defend themselves, but within the boundaries of humanitarian law and overall international law. We said that hostages should not be kept because this is totally against any sort of international law using people as human shields. And what we also said was that we need to minimize to the maximum the civilian losses. Obviously, all these were not heard, but the whole international community had this attitude. The point here is, Niamh, that we have to be as pressing as possible in order to implement eventually the halt of hostilities. At the moment, what we're
I'm a big bit
for
biased, Barry, but
is that
Glasgow's a beautiful
Palestinians
city,
need
mate.
to believe that there is
But
a
Glasgow's got
credible
lots
way
of
out.
wee...
And this
Scotland's
is
got
why
lots of
we're
wee
fully
perils,
supporting
man.
the two-state solution.
Dumbarton Castle, that's something out of
According to the
fucking
resolutions,
Game of
the resolutions of
Thrones.
the
Plus it's
Security
steeped
Council
in
of the
history.
United Nations, with East Jerusalem as the capital city of the Palestine state.
Ben Nevis,
And,
if you
of
like a wee
course,
mountain.
the pre-1967 borders. The thing is
Edinburgh
now
Castle, if you can
that
put
the
up
whole
with
community, the
foreigners.
whole international community needs to exercise the maximum pressure upon the parties in order to reach an
Glasgow, if you
agreement
want a
that
wee
I
bit of
really
split,
appreciate
spitting snorters
what
with your pint.
Qatar and Egypt
But see,
and
Glasgow
other
city
Arab
centre, man,
states are
fucking
doing,
safe as
and
houses,
the
right?
efforts of the European Union.
I'll say that,
How
then somebody will
convinced
get
are those
murdered,
Gulf
but
partners,
typically
Arab
safe as
states?
houses.
I mean, obviously, you're here in the region to speak to prominent figures. How convinced are those partners here in the Middle East and further afield that you are willing to push Israel as far as you possibly can on this?
At the moment, there is, I think, a consensus.
Interesting that old
with
Al
European Union
Jazeera's
partners
rolled out the
that
Greek
we
dude,
need to
didn't
have
it?
an immediate ceasefire, and we need to further develop our humanitarian aid towards Palestine. There is a consensus on this point, and I don't think there is.
Admits
any
Tories may
divergence.
no win
What we need
election.
to do
You,
is to
oh
find
my
the
God,
actual modes in
he's
order to exercise
brains
further
of fucking
pressure
Britain.
upon the parties, and
That
I'm speaking
dude.
both for the Hamas and
It's
for
not an area
Israel.
that's really fit for long-term human habitation. People are just getting out of the line of sight of what they fear may come. And we know that the orders have been issued for about 100,000 people, but far more people than that will
Is that the
move.
Scorpion
People moving
King?
now many of them,
Or
most
is,
of them have already left Gaza.
has there been
We've seen
some
similar
bombs,
circumstances,
artillery going off?
many Khan Yunis in the southern area as well. So they're moving where they can. A fear that if they leave it too long, there'll be nowhere else to go, and that there'll be nothing that they'll be able to take with them when they do go. So many here preemptively.
So let's just try and be a bit clear about the numbers. You're saying that at the moment,
Let's all laugh at Talk TV or Talk whatever they're fucking getting away calling themselves. The home of common sense. The common sense is to switch off, folks.
Orders in Eastern Rafah have
It's not going to be here longer.
approximately 100,000
I mean,
people.
look at that fine cast.
Information that we have received
Look at those. Look, I don't know about you. I meet guys like that all the time.
Many instances just falling from the sky. What I wanted to say was that the number of people on the move will be far higher than that, as people fear that this is just the first stage in a longer operation. I should reiterate that UNRWA, the largest agency here, we are staying.
Mags, if you're from Dundee, what do you think about? I'm not sure where it is. It's that building next to the port. If next to your port, it kind of it's all the slats, and apparently it's meant to look like a ship. You know, some people like it, some people don't. I don't know. Pretty sure it'll be a museum or something, no doubt. A maritime museum, maybe.
Power the operations around Gaza as well. We have been reassured by Israel that those fuel lines will be maintained, but it remains to be seen given on how this plays out over the coming days.
And in terms of those moving, if they do all move to Al-Mawasi, so 100,000 people potentially, but you think a lot more, Is there the space there? I mean, we've seen that there are already people gathered there. I mean, is there the capacity there for another 100,000 plus
how it
people?
looked in the United States.
What we need is the implementation.
People, I would say,
And
that
then they
there's
went,
no
oh, well, we need
capacity
to
to
put some
provide
pressure on
services
Israel.
to those.
But Benjamin Netanyahu isn't listening. It's obvious he is not being particularly influenced by America. So
who's that guy? I recognise him. He's an old British MP. Pretty sure he's Liberal Democrats or something. Oh, his name's on it. Oh, Lempit Opit.
If they didn't have
What a name.
Lembit
Opit. What a fucking name.
Student population.
I think you could called Limpet in school.
What's going to happen is the presidential election gets ever so
Here, Limpet.
And I suspect that.
And like fucking, you would walk by him limping. Like Limpet.
Any positivity in such a dreadful genocidal situation.
Right. Well, Nicholas, Netanyahu has said that Hamas's demands
I'm pretty sure, because he's the guy whose face is like a banana. It's like a pure.
Until its goals are met. Let's talk about the goals.
Stop flooding back to me.
Goals of the Israeli regime
Pretty sure he was Lib Dem.
right now in Gaza.
Pretty sure he was a Liberal Democrat.
Well, tragically, I think we know what their goals are. As my colleague here just said, the goals are the genocide of the Palestinian people. This has never been a war against Hamas, as we have seen since the
there's
days.
The Islamic resistance in Iraq down the bottom tagline hitting a port. I'm assuming it'll be in Israel. Several rockets from Syria at Israeli military positions in the Golan Heights. Israel says 3 soldiers killed, 12 injured in Hamas rocket fire at Gaza crossing. That's the one that Al Jazeera was reporting about, but the BBC didn't, because it killed Israelis. Maybe. Israelis kill 4 family members in the airstrike. Hezbollah hits Israeli military positions. Dozens of what? Something rockets.
Every time they killed a lot of paramilitaries, it increased the support for the IRA. It was only a negotiated settlement that stopped the killing. Now, it looks like we've forgotten the lessons of history. There is no way.
Or have we? Or have we?
Who have nothing to do with militancy at all is going to do anything except strengthen the resolve. Ask yourself this question. If a state killed somebody in your family, would you be more or less inclined to resist? Of course, you would be more inclined. And let's put the numbers in perspective here. 1.5%, 1.5% of the Palestinian population in Gaza has been killed. That's the same as killing over 5 million Americans. Now, America wouldn't lie down and accept it. They would resist. It's hardly surprising that the Palestinians are doing the same.
I seen something about George Galloway on the LBC website. I'm sure it was yesterday. Anyway, they kind of cornered him because he was talking about sex stuff and the gender stuff getting taught in schools, and he was saying, I want my kids to be taught that normally the ideal scenario is a mum, a dad, and a family. You can't have the kind of views anymore. You get hounded. So Dog Galloway, George Galloway's going to get smeared and pummeled every chance he gets. And his 2 kids be up this neck of the wood, go to a Catholic school, and he's like, they're protected at the moment because Catholic schools up here don't do all the sexy stuff. Don't do all the sex stuff that all your non-denominational, i.e. proddy schools do. But different story down in England. George Galloway's a bit of a mad shagger. I think he's got, according to that interview, he's got 2 families. 2 families, if that makes sense. Not at the same time. I think he's got an old wife and a new wife. I think that's how it works. See, he's got a face like a banana, hasn't he?
Escalate, and escalate. That this can really blow up into a regional war.
I don't know if it's
including against Iran.
Finally being able to stand on my own 2 feet and be independent thinking and action-wise in terms
No way.
of I'm able to
Now, try and tell me this isn't fucking a propaganda
I never
victory,
felt
man.
that I could.
Has language been a barrier for you? Coming from, obviously, in the UK, they mostly speak only English. They don't learn secondary languages that much. Did you speak Russian when you got here?
Fuck you, fucking Igor!
Been, as far as communication?
You're lucky if you're fucking staying away from the vodka long enough to fucking speak straight, you fucking
To retain it in my head.
Ruski
It's
fucking
an ongoing process.
putting
I
cock
wish
taking
that I
bastard.
could, be faster at learning the language, but we kind of make it work. It's sometimes it can be challenging. Initially it was, but then of course you find a way.
He does look like a
with
bit of a
pidgin
fucking
English,
retard,
pidgin
doesn't he?
Russian, sign language, you kind of, things, they work out quite quickly. And then of course, if you're spending all this time with your comrades, you find a common language.
If there was one thing you could have changed in this whole trip, this whole process that you've gone through, what would it have been?
I don't think there's anything I would change. Simply
I'd
because
asked RT for
then
more
it went
hookers
on my
and blow
experience, you know?
as
I
per
haven't
my
had
payment
many
for
negative
fucking getting on this
experiences
propaganda
here.
coup.
Maybe the one thing that I could change is.
Could I
there's been
definitely get
times
more
where
hookers and blow at them?
It can be
Definitely.
lonely, you know, especially with the language barrier. Naturally, you may be excluded from half the conversation with people generally if you don't speak Russian, you know.
Right.
So that's maybe not a negative experience, but maybe that as well as, you know, you miss home comforts, you know, friends, family. That's probably the only thing.
He'll be
that's really bothered me
protected
at times, you know?
as Prince Harry was in the British
Ukraine
Army.
is in retreat, and then we're moving forward up and down the front. And Ukraine is desperately trying to mobilize people and get more people to the front lines. Do you think at some point NATO troops are going to come in and fight for Ukraine?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that NATO troops are already there.
My phone's telling me
sheep
something
dip
interesting.
comes to mind, you know, where they're pulled out of the army, work with the intelligence, sent over there. So if they're ever caught, there's plausible deniability for them. But as you well know, as all the journalists well know, there's tens of thousands of Poles. You've probably got thousands of Americans, probably hundreds of British. And then, of course, you've got all the trainers and instructors over there under
Talking
the
about
guise
lithium
of
mines
training. So they're
in
already
America?
there. But if you're talking an official war, all-out war, I don't think it would happen. I think the next proxy would probably be Poland. So I think if you're going to have an issue with NATO, I think they would use Poland next rather than going head-to-head with Russia because they couldn't win.
What do you have to say for any of the guys that are thinking about coming over to fight for the Ukrainian side?
Simply open your eyes for one. The evidence is there if you want to see it. I mean,
Yeah, watch RT.
if you want to go and fight for Ukraine and end up going home in a wooden box, based on what? Because it's not ideology. So I would recommend that they wouldn't do such a thing. But of course, they've got their own minds and they're going to do what they're going to do. But
Well, what have you noticed over the last couple of months as far as being on the ground, moving with the front lines, with the conditions of moving forward?
As far as I can see, in terms of, other than the one
buddy,
incident that I told
there's
you
always a
about, where we had to
workabout
evacuate
round
the
and
camp, that
a
was-
reach
that was only
around
ever
getting a hold of these stuff.
And then, of course,
Just bear in
the
mind
Russians then
that
pushed back. So now and again, you might get
try to think
a
of how
tactical
long ago now, man. It must be in the last 2, 4, 5 years that Press TV and RTTV have been took off council television. So the way I can this is the difference between a laptop and using one of these window licking devices. Sorry, a laptop, a desktop, or using one of these window licking devices. I don't think I'd be able to get RT on this. I don't know. I've never tried, to be honest. I dare say it. If I put my mind to it, I would. But it's not as easy and as accessible as it used to be. So it's just minimising the effect, the ability for these broadcasters to propagate the messages they want. But I do get your point, mate. If Israelis want to see Al Jazeera, no doubt, they'll be able to find a way.
Of course,
Easy peasy.
Any kind of fighting when you're putting your life at risk is it makes you apprehensive in some.
All they do is need a VPN and go to YouTube. Al Jazeera's YouTube hasn't been took down. It's only been removed from satellite and TV broadcasters in the Israeli network. and their offices have been shut down in Israel, and they're no longer allowed to operate for 40 odd days as reporters in Israel. But as you've seen, they're sitting, floating about Rafah, doing all that jazz. Anyway, let's get back to Hector Spectre, the new Russian
it doesn't really
hero.
bother me if I come up against NATO troops per se. It sounds kind of blasé, like I'm not bothered, but it's like I'm already here fighting in the war. It makes no difference whether it's a Ukrainian flag or a NATO flag, you know?
Right, understand.
I'll kill them all,
as far as your family,
even if it's my brother.
Do you think any of them will ever come to see you here, or are you going to be able to see them again?
Well,
would they want to see you?
I've come to terms with the fact that a lot of my friends I'm never going to see again. You know, I can't go home to any funerals or weddings or parties or, you know, my children's birthdays. I think as my children
Second man out in Toy Story.
See me in Russia. Some of my family have said that they want to come and see me in Russia.
That's a good gym, buddy.
Saying it and actually doing it's two different matters. So I don't know. As far as I'm concerned, I'm over Russia and I'm starting a new life, and it's kind of like I've accepted the idea already that maybe that might not happen, so I might not get to see my friends or family again, you know.
So the British press labeled
Look
you
how
as
I've
a
got
traitor,
Firefox,
as we said
right?
before.
And
They
it's got
said
an
that,
add-on.
your family disowned you.
Oh, you can't see it. Let me just remove this. I'll show
What do
you.
you say to that?
This is how
much of
easy
that
my
is true? How
VPN
much
is,
of
right?
that is,
It's probably
yellow
going to fuck up all
journalism,
these
as they call it?
streams, but
Well,
So,
it's partly
you
true.
can see this
but,
up the top here.
It's not.
I've got
any
a
information
built-in
that they've
thing, me.
gleaned. I've been pretty open with it
All I
on
do
my
is need
social
to
medias in terms of
click on that.
my
I'm
journey,
in
so to
Singapore,
speak. Half
and
my family
then,
have
for
disowned me.
example,
Some of my friends have
I can now access the old Pirate Bay, which, when I turn the VPN off, that's really all I use it for, to be honest. Just getting Pirate Bay. The UK don't allow me to go near that.
They're not really political people.
Singapore,
They
you're
sit down
allowed.
in front of their TV after
Freedom, everybody!
eat their dinner.
Fucking
and they
hate
see the
us
news,
for
and
our
they kind
fucking
of believe
freedoms.
What they see on there, which is, you know, most people in most
Yeah,
countries. That's
just
kind
like
of the
people
case, you
will
know, so,
put this on, and
they've
because of
kind of,
confirmation bias, will blindly believe
coming over
RT
here.
and
I'm
everything
not gonna
they'll
list
try to
which
propagate,
family members
because they
and,
might tell you
know,
some things that you want to hear. or something
which
different
people
that's
that
for
it is
on the
that have
BBC.
disowned me. But yeah, I would say over half my family have disowned me for coming
With the
over
premise,
to,
only one of them's telling the
Russia.
truth.
The
You're the BBC
most
or
painful
RT.
aspect of it is,
Both of them
like,
can't be
now I don't see my
mouthpieces
children as
for
a result, you know?
Right, I understand.
Rushgate in the UK.
Did they know that you were coming over, or was it a surprise?
It was
post facto.
It was a surprise. I mean, maybe two people knew, and they were like personal friends, which still support me. But no one else knew. It had to be kept top secret. Because if it wasn't, I wouldn't have been allowed out of the country, because I was detained as it was when I was in London Airport under the Terrorism Act. But of course, there was no evidence that I was doing any wrongdoing, so they had to release me, because of course I was going to Russia on holiday, you know?
So wait a second. So you were flying to Russia on a holiday, as far as they knew, and they detained you at the airport?
Under the Section 7 of the Terrorism Act, yeah. For like 3-4 hours, and then they let me go, and I got my flight just in time.
Is that something they do for everybody, or is that something that, well, you got picked out of the crowd?
They don't do that.
I'm going to stab in the dark. The security services might have been monitoring his online activity, known that he's a Fruit Loop, going to go and fight for fucking Russia, and his name might have pinged a few fucking alerts at the airport. Just stabbing in the dark. Let's see how they spin it. Is like,
into their office. What are you doing? Why are you going?
Ruskies would do exactly the fucking same, if no worse.
Again, no evidence of any wrongdoing, so they had to let me get on the flight to come to Russia, and that's what I did.
Which is interesting, because
put on your chicken suit.
England is not, or the UK is not officially at war with Russia in any sense, and at the same time, you have the freedom to make your own decisions, to choose your own side. But you got pulled out because of your leanings.
I think that's probably because, of course, I'd imagine.
There you go, Barry. There's one for Chrome. There's one for Firefox. Firefox, it's just the add-ons and put in VPN, and you'll get a free one.
Well, why are they going there for? So maybe you might get a little investigation.
As your dude was saying, it's limited.
But of course,
you know, only certain areas. But for me, all I need it for
which is
quite
ironic. It is ironic, isn't it? What do you say as
go to
far
Pirate Bay.
as
It's the biggest and best
terrorism
place to get all your
regime in
downloads
Kyiv
and
has
shit.
been, sponsored?
I'm no longer
other
paying for all
terrorist
these
attacks.
streaming sites and shit
Well, they're
because it's
desperate,
fucking.
aren't they? I mean, this is.
You end up
you can see
fucking
with
spending a
that
fortune a month.
situation, especially
and
in
not even
Moscow, and then of course
viewing
their
them
drone
and all
attacks
that
into
shit. Anyway,
Russian territory, and then of course bombing marketplaces in Belgorod. It's the last throes of a desperate regime.
I think he's a
but of
sniper.
course, it's disgusting
Milk
because
bottle
these innocent
fucking
people
glasses.
that are getting murdered and maimed.
He's
And
a
all I gotta
spotter.
do- all I can say really is I condemn that. And all that's going to happen is they're just going to get a stronger response, and it's just going to end more quicker, to be fair.
Now, does any of that come out in the British press? Did the
He looks
British
like a
people
bit
say
of a
anything,
fat bastard as
associated
well,
with that?
doesn't he?
With Crocus City or with any of the bombings in Belgrade?
Hardly like a
or in,
fucking
Donetsk?
pinnacle of physical.
That's not really, other than if they try and blame Russia
He's
for
a
doing it, for bombing
physical
themselves.
peak. Peak.
The attack in Moscow was televised in the West, but of course my understanding from people back home is that it was Islamic terrorists that did it.
He looks
of course,
like
Ukraine had played no part in it. I suppose in a way, even though I know these things the West say are nonsense, it's like sometimes they're in your head, you know? So I come to Russia and I think, actually, of what they said, is that true? But if anything, it's the complete opposite. It's not only not true, it's completely fake, completely false. And in actual fact, I feel freer in Russia than I do in the United Kingdom, which may sound bizarre to some people, but to me, that's my experience, you know?
You know, and I've heard it in my direction, I've heard it other people.
Of course you're free, mate. You're a British citizen fighting in the Russian army. They're going to use and abuse you for propaganda purposes, you dick.
The real truth. What would you say to that?
I mean, these people are reading newspapers and watching TV. I'm living it, you know? That's the difference. Is you know, and I can be very abrasive at times, you know, so if there's things that I see that I'm not happy with, I'll say. And I've had those experiences with officers and commanders, a few incidences where I was unhappy, I spoke to them, approached them, and they resolved it instantly. So I'm not being hoodwinked. The few little issues that I
you're
have, which
right,
is
pal.
minor issues, is probably not even relevant to the conversation, but my point being is I was able to
don't mention there being
remedy
issues.
situations quite quickly. Being hoodwinked, no, I mean nonsense. I mean, you know, I don't know what to say to that. It's just complete rubbish. Like, if I was being hoodwinked, I wouldn't be doing these interviews, you know.
And you getting hoodwinked, you fat dumb fuck.
Speaking to me, but no,
You're getting used and pampered, hookers and blow every fucking night, as much as you can eat, as much as you can drink, 5-star hotel, so you can do fucking puff pieces like this, you dumb fuck.
They then start with this nonsense, like I'm being hoodwinked, and next in the papers, it'll
You're
be,
getting used, you
Putin's
fat
stooge,
bastard.
Putin's thug,
Dumb
which, you know,
fuck.
they've started that already anyway.
Well, if there's anything you'd like to tell us, anything more before
And remember,
interview,
the UK government has set the precedent for revoking people's citizenry with that Begum or Begum or whatever her name was, that fucking ISIS
mainly
bride.
to the British people that support Ukraine and the government that support Ukraine, it's a lost cause for you. And not only is it a lost cause, it's the wrong cause. You know, you're going over there. You're
Russia's good,
murdering
West is
people.
bad.
You've got British soldiers.
Came for you
which
for
are
your
going over there
specky
serving,
conspiracy
and I don't know
theorist.
what reason they got for doing that, but my imagination would, I imagined that it would be money and the fact that they're probably psychopaths and they like the idea of going to fight a war. So what they need to do is lay down their guns, because they've got no problem, they've got no quarrel with Russia at all. There's no reason for those to fight for Ukraine. You know, a fascist regime which openly support Bandera. And if they don't believe me, the people back home, I mean, in terms of maybe watching this or reading the newspapers or whatever, you know, a quick Google search will show you the statues of Bandera, and it will show you that Ukraine, you know, they have a national holiday after Bandera. And not just Bandera, also the other fascists that were members of the
Nazi
Organization of
SS.
Ukrainian Nationalists, I think it was called, the OUN. So yeah, there's no quarrel. So I want the British soldiers to put their guns down, go back home.
I'd like to thank you. Thank you for your time and for your honesty and openness. And
Is he falling asleep, or does he fucking just can't open his eyes? Maybe that's the fucking drugs that Putin's gave him more than enough.
Thank you again.
The opportunity. Now that was some good shit, wasn't it? That's a wee coup. No, a moo coup. Just a propaganda coup. What's this?
How can it be that arms are shipped to the Middle East from a country whose top officials constantly complain about shortages of ammunition and military equipment?
Зброя для України, боєприпаси для України, нові оборонні системи для України.
رح نتصل بواحد من تجار السلاح بمنطقة البقاع لحتى يجي يحكي لنا، نصور نحن وياه مقابلة، يجي يخبرنا بالضبط شو الوضع السلاح الأوكراني، هل في سلاح أوكراني عنا ولا لا، ومن وين عم يجي.
Why are weapons from Ukraine?
Oh, right, so they're talking about people on the take, about all the weapons that are getting flooded into Ukraine ending up elsewhere. Right, I'm trying to think. It'll be the top of the hour news soon. There's that guy, I think he's dead. What was that group he was talking about, that UK Russian warrior guy? Bandana or something? That's the first time I've came across that. Must be like one of the old figureheads of the National Socialists. The meat grinder of humanity is working overtime. Every corner of the globe is on fire right now. But remember, we're not at war. I mean, the UK isn't officially at war with Russia. What happened in Syria? What's happening in Ukraine? What's happening in Israel? What's happening in Taiwan? Myanmar. The New World Order is emerging. Right, that's got to be the... Pretty sure Sky News will lead with Ramallah.
Hello, you're watching Sky News today. It's 11 o'clock. These are our headlines. Israel tells Palestinians in Gaza to begin evacuating parts of the city of Rafah, signalling that a ground invasion may be imminent. They're being encouraged to go to nearby Al-Mawasi, designed by the Israeli Defense Forces as a humanitarian zone. John Swinney looks set to become the next leader of the Scottish National Party, with nominations for the job closing at noon. China's President Xi arrives for talks in Paris with Emmanuel Macron. It's the Chinese leader's first visit to Europe in 5 years. Sky News has discovered that the government considered sending migrants to Iraq as part of a similar scheme to Rwanda. The sound of protest in land long considered sacred, which is now at the heart of America's electric car revolution.
Who do you think's going to win that battle? I think I'll put my money on the Native Americans. You'll get some good odds on them coming up stunts.
Hello, good morning. The Israeli
I caught snippets of the Putin, the Tucker Carlson interview with Putin. But I think it was quite long. You know what you're going to get.
More than 1 million people is imminent.
It's no like breaking or anything.
Well, the new Israeli evacuation order covers around
just
100,000 people living in
because it was Tucker Carlson who gets a lot of hits and clicks for the English-speaking world. It was Putin being able to speak to the West, wasn't it?
The IDF has expanded a declared humanitarian zone to include large parts of Khan Yunis, where Israeli troops have now withdrawn. Leaflets dropped over eastern Rafah this morning urge people to evacuate immediately to the zone and not to return to the north of the Strip. Our international correspondent John Sparks has more now from Jerusalem.
This is clearly a critical juncture in this conflict. You know, senior Israeli officials have been warning about an incursion into Rafah, into southern Gaza, for the last couple of weeks. We heard from the defense minister yesterday. He said it could...
Okay, I'm going to just try and get a wee round up and then do the off. Get out in the lovely Scottish summer. It's much here, muchness.
Live from London, this is BBC News. Israel's military begins what it's calling a limited and temporary evacuation of civilians from Rafah in southern Gaza. This is the scene live in Al-Mawasi in Gaza, where some of the
Genocide Live. Welcome to 2024, everybody.
Chinese President Xi Jinping arrives in France on the first leg of his European tour.
Xi Jinping.
5 years. John Swinney is expected to be confirmed as the new leader of the Scottish National Party shortly, after a potential challenger pulls out of the race.
Oh, fucking hell, man. What is the fucking world coming to? Right, so to get something a wee bit different, I'm going to have to come to Al Jazeera and press TV.
Our correspondent Mutabam Saba was with us from Deir al-Balah. He has said that Palestinians are not moving after Israel called for the evacuation of parts of Rafah.
Cut.
The Palestinian people have been suffering from these continuous and successive displacements from a place to another. Now, this displacement actually happens amid the catastrophic humanitarian conditions.
He definitely needs his factor 50 in that fucking neck of the wood, didn't he?
Civil defense crews and infrastructure of the Gaza health sector here in Gaza Strip. These sectors actually were completely paralyzed and collapsed over the continuous and the successive Israeli attacks. The current situation is catastrophic, and the people would never.
I'm no expert, and I'm only going on the top of my mind, but the Nazi support for Ukraine was during World War II, when there was Ukrainian soldiers, battalions, working with the Germans. I'm trying to think. I don't know if it was the SS or the Luftwaffe. I remember hearing about it and coming across it, but forgot. But I know my first-hand experience, kinda for that neck of the wood, and I had a Polish girlfriend for a good bit. And
even infrastructure or even any abilities or capabilities.
Polish people's attitudes, fucking crazy, man. Crazy.
The Lebanese
certainly different for your
Hezbollah
average
says it has
Brit.
targeted Israeli positions with nearly 70 Katyusha rockets. Hezbollah says the targets were military locations.
At least fucking 40, 50 years behind your average Brit when it comes to the whole race thing. I mean, like, really behind the fucking times. Hate fucking Russia.
For the Israeli military.
Hate Russians.
The movement also says the attack was in response to the regime's latest strike on eastern Lebanon. Israeli fighter jets earlier struck a factory in the village of
if any's no
Bekaa
fucking
Valley.
Polish people
The air
personally,
raid
which is a
reportedly wounded 3
high
Lebanese
percentage of people in the
civilians
UK
and
now,
destroyed the
man.
factory. Hezbollah and the
You
Israeli
know exactly
military
what I'm
have been
talking about,
trading
man.
fire since
Polish people
early
have some
October
hardcore
after
attitudes. I
the
think that's the
regime
best way to
launched
explain
its
it.
onslaught on Gaza.
This is the kind of shit you won't get on the BBC's or Sky News, because I think they're reporting Israeli deaths and stuff.
For an
So,
update on the latest round of escalations
all you'll
between
get is
Hezbollah resistance
Rafah
movement and Israel. This is what she had to tell
and
us.
that attack.
Today, of course, the operation with the launching of the Katyusha rockets into the Golan Heights against the command center, basically, of the Golan Heights division, that was, it's true, it was a very heavy barrage of rockets, a very intense operation, but the greatest, basically the most intense day of fighting seemed to be yesterday. The Israelis themselves said that this is probably the first time where you have some 100 rockets between Katyusha and Falak that were targeted, that were launched towards the Israeli settlements.
Syria
now, Hezbollah
and
today launched this attack, the strike against the Golan Heights division, basically in
Hezbollah, Lebanon,
retaliation
then.
for the targeting of an area in the Bekaa region. This is in eastern Lebanon. The Israelis are boasting about the fact that they are retaliating for yesterday's strikes and launched targets for Hezbollah. We know from sources that
He hurt me
strike
first.
against
No,
eastern
he hurt me
Lebanon
first.
targeted
No,
an
he
area
hurt
where there
me
were
first.
residential building. There was also basically two factories, a factory for tissues and a plastic factory. So what we have are basically casualties not among the civilians, but we do have civilian infrastructure that was targeted and destroyed by the Israelis. Hezbollah has made it clear.
Right, we've seen the tit for tat. Let's see. Some Ukrainian subscription
As for
in
Ukrainians
action.
of age living abroad, well, they're not safe either. Just recently, authorities decided to suspend consular services for their citizens abroad. So let's say a Ukrainian citizen residing outside of Ukraine needs to renew his passport. Well, he cannot do that. Instead, he will have to go to Kiev and never get out, because once you're there and you are eligible for conscription, why would they let you go?
EU member states need to make a joint decision on repatriating Ukrainians who are dodging the country's military draft. We definitely need a uniform European decision on this issue.
Remember all the
It looks odd that
Ukrainian refugees that were welcomed while the brown people on boat were getting fucking slagged off? Well, we're going to have to send all these Ukrainians home.
Sort of deja vu. Like when U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham bluntly said that, well, as long as the U.S. keeps on supporting Ukraine, Kiev will keep on fighting till they have no more people left.
As long as we help Ukraine with the weapons they need and the economic support, they will fight to the last person.
Getting weapons and equipment from the West
Fucking
is
slaughter
not
them all,
enough.
man.
You need people
Throw another
firing
fucking
those
Ukrainian on the
weapons,
fire.
operating this equipment and digging the trenches. If Ukraine's already failed to defeat Russia when it had a lot more healthy people willing to fight, you can make your own bet as to how it's going to go now.
The Democrat minority leader of the U.S. House of Representatives, Hakeem
Hey,
Jeffries,
is this guy drunk
recently
or
said
too posh to
Washington might
talk,
send
or a bit
troops
of
into the
both?
front lines to face Russia if Ukraine is defeated.
We can't let Ukraine fall, because if it does, then there's a significant likelihood that America will have to get into the conflict. Not simply with our money, but with our servicewomen and our servicemen. We can either stop Russia in Ukraine by continuing our military and economic support, or we can face a challenging situation where Vladimir Putin and Russia are able to overrun Ukraine and then threaten NATO allies.
It's
Yeah,
Dolly
well, Michael
Obama.
Wolff,
Remember
former
Dolly
senior
the sheep?
security policy analyst at the Pentagon. He thinks that Washington's support for Ukraine since the very beginning of the conflict has been ludicrous.
I would say anything on a sustained basis that can be poured in will not help them, because there is no ability to be for this to be a sustaining effort to continue supplying the Ukrainians. The industries of all of Europe and even the United States is not geared up for a wartime manufacturing capability. And as it is, the United States has pretty much exhausted its own stockpiles.
I think that was
and
last
that's why
night.
The
Not the
majority of that, about 80% of that 61
not the coming invasion.
billion going for Ukraine is actually going to the defense industry to make new stuff to replenish our own stockpiles. The entire episode of the U.S. backing of this entire experience.
So, I think it's kind of obvious what the news is telling us to think about. Xi Jinping coming to the EU. I don't think he's coming to Scotland. I don't think he's coming to the UK. He's going to France and then is it Serbia and Hungary. Go and look at where they're at on a map and go and look at their one road, one belt initiative that China's putting in. It kind of makes sense why he's holding out diplomatic ties with they boys. Israel's going to flatten Rafah. John Sweeney's the walk-in for the SNP dude. Israel and Iranian proxies in and around Syria and Iraq are launching missiles at Israel. Nobody's talking about the peace negotiations in Egypt anymore. I don't know if they've just been suspended. Are they still ongoing? I've not heard a word about them this morning. Oh, and Ukraine. That's kind of just that's as it was, you know. It's just the war. It's just the information war now. But very notably, you don't hear one word. Let me get this right. Hold on, was there? I'm pretty sure I've seen in the English dominated press, the British dominated press, I think I heard them mention change to Ukraine's conscription, but it was like a wee couple of minutes, whereas you bounce over to RT and they've got like 10-15 minute pieces on that shit, as well as British soldiers fighting for the Ruski army.
Glasgow at the weekend, but no sooner had the bid launched, it was over.
Look at all those young pups.
In a statement late last night, Mr McCormick said he'd met the nominations threshold to enter the contest, adding that after a lengthy and fruitful
do you know all their
conversation with
favourite
John
move? I
Swinney,
could go there
they had agreed
with
on the
Braveheart
challenges which the SNP,
t-shirts and
Scottish
makeup
government
on.
and people face. He described it as a fresh start to deliver Scottish independence. He said, "I have therefore concluded that I shall not proceed with my nomination for party leader," throwing his support behind John Swinney. Over the weekend, Mr Swinney insisted he was the right man for the job.
I feel physically and mentally ready to become the leader of the SNP.
I'm Lex Luthor, and I can take on Superman.
Absolutely everything I have in me to make sure that my party succeeds.
Been there, done that, and bored the tits off every cunt. He's a boring motherfucker.
It's all but certain.
And let's be honest, nowadays it's all about the fur coat. No cunt gives a fuck about the knickers.
BBC News.
Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News.
Yeah, there's the Romulan work to do after local election losses. Okie dokie, so I think that's enough for today. Thanks everybody tuning in. Remember, I'm going to do my best to do this every morning, starting about 9-10 o'clock. Just a roundup of all the daily PoliTITS. And see what all this illusion of choice of journalism, see how they're all pretty much, to a certain degree, saying the same shite, reporting on all the same stuff, more or less, just with slightly different editorial stances, which it's great to watch them all together because you can pick up on what the BBC leaves out, what Al Jazeera puts in, etc. I mean, I can't believe why the BBC didn't report on British citizen fighting in the Russian army, or the Russians having a parade with NATO armour and whatnot in Moscow. Can't believe that. So, if you do enjoy the shindig, stick a wee thumbs up, sub up, bell up, all that jazz, and tune in tomorrow. Thanks everybody for getting involved in the chat and all that as well. Have a nice day and stay tuned. You might be able to watch a wee bit of Genocide live on news channels. Ain't it sweet? You've got the genocide on your TV. Tell you very confidentially, genocide live on the TV. Need to work on that one. Catchies! Clips, clips! And remember, citizens, always subscribe. Hit the notification bell as well. And $19.95 plus shipping and handling will keep you out of hell.